people ask the question, what solutions, what actions can I take toward the truth, toward what I see as evidence that I want to bring to more people, what I want other people to understand and utilize and see all this great potential in the world, essentially? Well, if you need more help in that, this guide, this video, this presentation will tell you everything you need to know about bringing truth to action and also action to truth. Because we need to know both, and those are two things, two separate things that we have to deal with in this world, and I assume most people want to know the truth, but do you know about action when you do see the truth? Because that is a whole nother thing, and we're going to go into that with this presentation. The two biggest things we want to look at here is, well, simplicity and effectiveness, because we don't want something overly complicated, a huge structure. We want everybody to take the same actions toward the same cause so we can have a greater effect in this world, toward the world that we all inherently desire, perhaps. Whereas effectiveness, we want to make sure we're treating the root cause and we're not just treating some symptom-based management. So we need to understand that, and I'm going to go over all these things in this presentation. As it says on the slide, it's all you need to know, and I really mean it. But we keep this very simple, and the actions itself are very simple, and believe it or not, when you do understand the truth, it's really simple. So this is the guide to and for action to change the world for good, and I mean actual good. Right? Because most people don't want to do harm to their fellow friends and neighbors and family, right? Most people don't want to steal from anybody. Most people want to do good. They want to bring the truth to others and share that good. Maybe the whole cause for finding the truth to begin with is to prevent evil doing from being done, to prevent the bad, and to bring about more good, right? So understand the cause, and we're going to go over all these different things here in this presentation. So let's just get started. So the second slide here we have, if you are complaining, you can't be thinking about or creating what you do want. So this is a good quote because it talks about something that I see often with people who are, they may know the truth, they may know some things, other people, they want them to know, but instead of complaining, and you can use your anger, and it's there for a reason, that you want to, unleash it, and you want to say something's wrong, and you need to notice that it's here. While you are complaining, also keep in mind that is time you could be creating something, right? Or you can complain, but are you going to always complain, or are you going to do something about it? Because there's a difference, right? If you're always complaining, you're going to be known as the complainer. You're going to be known as the conspiracy theorist who's always questioning things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But put it into action, be the change, like Gandhi says, and show that it is possible, an alternative route, an alternative solution to the systems that be of control. So you can promote freedom, for example, which I believe a lot of people do want inherently. I have a video talking about how all of us inherently desire freedom, and this concerns much of the so-called truth that we speak of, and the truth is simply what is. It's that of the past, of the present, all around us. It's that of which we look at history, and we learn from the events in history, so we know what happened as the result of certain behaviors being done. So actions that we can observe and see what were the effects of those actions, so we can understand our actions when we want to make a good impact on the world instead of a bad impact. So that's how we can learn from history. So we don't repeat history in a bad way, but we actually understand, well, okay, maybe how did certain people declare independence? How did they free themselves? And then how did they become enslaved again? These are very important questions so we can actually become more sustainable than ever for the future. And I think these actions toward the truth really ties into that. We're looking at really the fundamental here of not just the truth, but action toward truth. So understanding, well, once you do have knowledge that other people don't have, and you have the moral obligation to share it with other people, how can you amplify that so you can really change the world? Because let's face it, at that point, if you have the truth and it's really important knowledge, you can save lives. You can really save the world. So save and change the world, either one, both. That's what we might need, especially in a world like today. If there's a lot of mass control or growing control in the world, I think a lot of people just want that freedom. They want to bring truth to people. Maybe there's censorship going on, so there's not a lot of knowledge going around, or truthful knowledge. So we need to find a way to spread that, right? And it's not just through online, as I'll demonstrate to you here. We're going to look at all those strategies as we move on. And instead of complaining, we're going to focus today on action. So the two objectives here we have for this presentation is number one, knowing the truth, okay, and then number two, knowing how to manifest the truth. So essentially, number one, knowing the truth is knowing the why, because we're understanding the root cause to the problems of our world. The truth, okay, the truth of why we are in the situation, why we want to share more of the truth. Well, it's because obviously then we live in a world of deception, so we want to bring the truth to people in a world of deception. It makes sense. That's why we would want to know the truth. Or maybe we seek something because, it's coming of great interest, and because it's of a personal desire that we have, that we want to learn more about the truth. We want to learn more about why did democide occur, for example, in World War II? Because that resulted in millions of deaths. If we want to ask the question why, we will get to the root cause of what caused millions of deaths. And essentially, we can then save lives if we understand the root cause, and we essentially don't do that, right? We don't do the thing that caused it. So we get right to the why. And that is where the how comes in, is saying, well, how do we understand this? How do we understand the why to begin with, right? Well, we have to get rid of our mental blockades, our ignorance, our fear, our systems of control, whatever it may be, within your personal life. It could be your family, friends, your internal conflict of whatever kind. So getting the how for the why, and then the why for the how. So what I mean by that is, once you understand the why, then how do you bring that to other people? Bring the truth to other people, otherwise the truth can't manifest on its own. It relies on us understanding the truth and living in harmony with truth. The truth, it's already present. It's all a matter of if we choose to accept it or not, to align our actions with it or not. Okay, and this is the same concept of natural law, which you may or may not have heard of, and we'll go a little bit into that as well, because it's a very essential aspect for why. Natural law is very related to cause and effect, the law of attraction, karmic law, moral law. And the fact that your behavior has consequences, and there's consequences to all the actions you take in this world. And there is a good and bad, and that's how you understand your rights, is by knowing right and wrong. So when we understand this, then we understand, well, what's going to create a better world? I said the word good, right? And what's going to create a bad world, one that is more inherently evil, more that has more control, more chaos, more fear, more confusion, perhaps. All those things you would see in a negative manifested world, one of a negative natural law expression. So we address the why, right? Knowing the truth. Now, number two is knowing how to manifest the truth. A totally different situation. It's one to know the truth, another to know how to share it with others. They're two separate things. So let's understand what we need to do then. So we identified our two objectives. Now the two problems. Well, number one is not starting, okay? And number two is not going all the way. And this is a quote from Buddha. You might notice, but with or without looking at what the quote stands for within itself, this is relevant because a lot of people have the fear of starting to begin with. They're like, I'm going to be judged, so people are going to think this of me or that. You need to have courage and bravery in this process, otherwise the truth will not get out to people, especially in the world where people are deceived or they need the truth the most. So then number two is not going all the way. Well, okay, you're going to stop here, you're just going to vote, you're just going to be part of the process, but how about going the full way and bringing the knowledge to people to truly free their minds, which is what's ultimately going to free them. You can change all these other things, but again, if that's just symptom management, if you can't get to the root cause of the problem and realize that it's all in the minds of people that are creating the world around us, if you can't affect the minds, then you're not going all the way. So starting and going all the way. Remember, our minds, whatever we think becomes our actions, and our actions then manifest, meaning if all of us are taking certain actions, that's what's going to become the world around us, right? So if we all are taking the similar actions, then that's the result we're going to get, a similar manifested reality. Because again, that's learning cause and effect. That's a law of nature. So one of the things that this can include, right, is permitting wrongdoing. That's a problem, right? There's two problems, not starting and not going all the way. And this can include permitting wrongdoing. What I mean by that is there's oftentimes we do actions and we don't realize that it's actually harmful or that it actually results in harm. Certain things we're unconscious of what it's actually doing in the world. right? So we want to understand that going all the way for truth is not doing something that's actually going to result in wrongdoing, but going all the way for doing fully right. As much as you can, do the best you can, and not letting certain wrong things take place. If you know it's wrong, it's wrong. You don't want to let it take place. It's like if you were in World War II and you were on the communist or Nazi side, right? And you had to carry people to the camps or to the gulags or whatever. You knew that you were doing something wrong. You were hurting your fellow man, and you were just following orders, and that was your excuse to justify the action. But you're essentially permitting a wrongdoing because you know it's wrong, but you're doing it anyways because you're just following orders. That's a very big problem, right? So although these are two problems, concerning the truth, that is a very big problem, is permitting wrongdoing. So let's just understand that we want to be conscious of what we're doing here, especially when it comes to taking action, because, well, it's going to matter a lot. Your legacy, how people view you, and everything like that is going to play into here to action. It all plays into here. So the main focus here is not select people, not select events, but select ideas. Okay, so this is also a common quote as well, but it's to show that, a lot of people like to talk about other people. This is common on the internet. It gets people a lot of views. Now, some people like to talk about events. That's pretty important, right? What's going on in the world? But what's even more important is ideas, because again, now you're changing the minds of people more than anything. Now, it's not to say people and events are not important, but it's to say that ideas should be the focal point here, the main focus, again. So you can connect people and events to those ideas, and that's what makes it very impactful. But do focus on those ideas, because those ideas are very big. They broaden your perspective, especially if they're ideas that are differing, they're different from the current ideas, the current norms in society. It gets people thinking differently and thus innovatively, so that way new things come about. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting what you keep getting. So the key to that is to essentially introduce something new. And I like to talk about this, how it's more of an integrative approach. You add in the crowd out the bad. So you add in the good to crowd out the bad, and that happens naturally. You don't have to necessarily eliminate the bad, but you crowd out the bad by adding in the good. And essentially at the same time you are eliminating the bad, but it makes it much easier to do so. You still identify the bad because you need to identify it, right? But you understand what is good, and thus that is what's going to really drive you toward your goals, your focus, your objectives here as we're defining. So again, on recap, we have the main focus, select ideas, the two problems, not starting, not going all the way, and the two objectives, knowing the truth and knowing how to manifest the truth. Very, very important. So now, what is the main problem, right? Because we talked about the two problems, and I said there was one that was including, and that was, well, permitting wrongdoing. So the main problem here is mass mental enslavement by consent, which is also called statism, and belief to unnatural and immoral or harmful systems. So again, I will read it one more time. Mass mental enslavement by consent and belief to unnatural and immoral systems. Now, anything that is immoral is harmful, something that results in harm, something that violates someone's property, something that is a form of theft. Any action that's a form of theft is a form of crime. Anytime there's a victim, there's a crime. No victim, no crime. So statism is the belief in authority, that authority is vested in certain individuals, that certain individuals have a moral, legitimate right to rule over another. And most individuals, if I ask them that question, they understand that no individual has a moral, legitimate right to rule over another, because I own me just as you own you. We own ourselves, and that is sovereignty. And when we recognize that sovereignty, we recognize we're not a slave, right? So we're super. This is how you define sovereign in Latin. Super reign, right? So above rulership, above that type of master slave relationship. So you can have self-mastery, self-ownership. When you own yourself and you master yourself, because you have the knowledge of who you are as an individual, you won't let other individuals rule over you. And so this is the whole idea of understanding statism. If you're new to this idea, I encourage you to look up statism, look up voluntarism, look up agorism. because these are very key ideas to understanding what true freedom actually is. And if you need more clarification, I'll put links in the description below. I also have videos such as 144 proofs government should not and does not exist, limited government is impossible, how you already are a real anarchist. Although these might be some alarming titles, these videos will help you understand what statism is. And most importantly, if you want to learn about statism, go to nita.one/advanced, because you'll see plenty of resources on there, including books, and it addresses every concern you might have, every question you might have. There's videos, there's study guides, there's everything in different formats, so you may learn the best you may. So now, okay, so we have this mass mental enslavement, which is the worst form of slavery, because I also have a video called, Slavery Still Exists and It's Not What You Think. And I talk about also natural leadership versus unnatural leadership. So we try to cover everything here on this channel, and many others have covered it because we have something called the One Great Work Network, full of hundreds of different teachers from around the world talking about natural law, talking about statism, getting to the root cause of the problems in the world. And if this is the main problem, well, you bet this is the root cause to a lot of the problems we see in the world. This is the why. Okay, so this is the why we see things in the world. People legitimately are claiming that they have the right to rule over another human being, and then the slave says, well, I guess I have to be a slave. They feel like they are morally obligated to obey, whereas the masters feel like they're morally obligated to rule. And it creates this master-slave dynamic. The same excuses made for government are the same excuses made for slavery, and this is the worst form of slavery, as said by Frederick Douglass, a former slave himself, which is mental enslavement. And when you can't read, you can't write, you can't acquire the knowledge for yourself, well, you're quite the slave, because many of the physical slaves of the past were unable to read, unable to write, unable to learn. They didn't have the knowledge to free themselves, but when they did have the knowledge, they did free themselves. And so it's not even that we have to force upon this process of knowledge, of understanding, but simply that the knowledge must be present, and one must learn and know how to acquire that knowledge. And essentially, they need to use their human nature of reading, of being conscious, to understand this phenomena. So you taking the time investment to look at the resources, to watch this presentation, within itself is you using your human nature for something that is really important to free yourself, to free your human nature, to understand more about your nature. And so the main problem, though, is due to the lack of the main action. The lack of the main action. So the main action is in bold. What does that mean? Well, it's because we have a slide for that as well. So we have the main problem, and if this is the why, we need to know then, well, the main how. The main action then, as I mentioned, awareness of knowledge or education of natural law and or rights, which is morality again, and statism. So when we know our rights, we won't lose them. And that's the key here. When we don't know it, well, we can't say no. We're always yesing, yes, yes, okay, yes, I'll do that, yes, I'll do that, because we don't have the knowledge to say no. It's the lost word, no, because you are declaring, no, definitively, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to support a system of slavery. No, I'm not going to support a system of control. I'm going to free myself. So this is the main action for the main problem. The main problem, again, mental enslavement by consent and belief to unnatural and immoral systems. The main action is awareness of knowledge of natural law and or rights and statism. This is also known as, okay, and I mentioned this before, the use of human nature, okay, which is conscience, which is sovereignty, because we, again, innately own ourselves, and responsibility, because we are ultimately always responsible for our own actions. Our conscience always decides right and wrong for ourselves, and we should not suppress that for following orders. So if we use our human nature, we won't lose it. Right? So we need to use what we are born with, what we are given with, and not suppress that for some external system that it doesn't really exist, but that is believed to exist in the mind. That's why it's a belief system. And because it doesn't exist, it's unnatural. And so we want to use what is natural, what is of nature here. And that's why I say nature is the answer, as it was titled in the beginning of this presentation. Okay, and I didn't even say my name because this is not about me. This is about all of us. This is about all of our actions here combined in effect to try to really change the world. And I think that's why you're watching. You want to change the world? Well, I'm going to give you the best knowledge that I can so we can all do this together. We need to work together to do this. Not a lot of people understand the truth itself, nonetheless, the actions to go and do it. So we need people starting it. And who will start it? It's got to be somebody, especially in a world that needs it. Okay, we're desperate. We're growing desperate as more people fail to the system, fall to the system, because the systems are failing them, and they have no choice. They feel like they have no choice but to fall to the system because the system is placing them in systems of fear and control and confusion, as I mentioned. So, of course, it's going to affect people's human nature negatively, where they cannot think for themselves and love one another and utilize knowledge because they're being fed different knowledge, or they're kept ignorant because they're being fed knowledge, if anything, in a certain set restricted mindset. So these things are going to affect people's human nature. And if people use their human nature to really expand their mind, and use it freely as they shall, then they will see a whole world of actions, regarding any issue that comes about in the world. The issue itself will present actions if you understand the issue deep enough. Okay, so if you're asking for solutions, you can find the solutions yourself, and you shall, especially since only you are living your own life. Only you are going to truly know what to do for your own life. I can't tell you every single action that you have to do. It's ultimately always up to you. And so this is also known as, when we understand education of natural law and our rights, morality, and statism, it's also known as simply the knowledge of nature, right? Because we understand behavior, and behavior is essential to every form of social behavior, and politics and habit. So when we have the knowledge of nature and the nature of our world, the nature of government itself, nature of these systems, nature of education, we're understanding everything to the deepest degree, and thus we're also understanding harm, right? Because again, anything that is wrong or immoral is a form of harm. We're understanding evil. We understand how it manifests into the form that is known as slavery, or into the form that is known as democide. And so if we have knowledge then of what creates people as slaves or what creates democide, well, then not only are we saving lives, we're saving lives that are taken from other people, lives that are controlled by other people, lives that deserve to be freed, lives that deserve to be lived. See, so people can actually utilize their nature, not suppress it or give it into somebody else, right? People feel like they can just give their responsibilities to others and say, well, they can handle it for me. And that's perfectly fine. But in the real world, in reality, you own yourself. Only you are truly responsible for your own actions. And so slavery is not the reality, but it's the reality we've made ourselves into through our belief system that, yes, slavery is legitimate, when we believe in such a system that encourages it, but we don't realize and recognize what slavery is, and thus we don't make the connection that slavery is actually being done. And that's why understanding statism is essential for this process of the main problem for the main action. Again, understanding the guide to and for action, as I mentioned in the beginning, that's what is going to help carry this on, is understanding the main problem and the main action. And more upon the main action, here you see a chart talking about natural law, the 5 basic breaches of natural law, what a right is, what a wrong is, and it talks about how a right and a wrong are mutually exclusive, which means they cannot be changed. Just because somebody says, well, I'm going to say this is right, and even if it's wrong, I don't care. You can't change that. A right is a right, a wrong is a wrong. The belief that you can just choose whatever you want it to be is called moral relativism. A satanic tenet, if you look it up, something that basically says, well, I can be God. I could decide the rules. And there is no objective difference, even though I wouldn't purposely do harm in my own life, right? Because most people, even if they, think, okay, well, there is no objective difference in right or wrong, they will not intentionally do something wrong to somebody because they know it's going to cause wrong in return. They know that by doing good, they're generally going to attract good. Again, this is the law of attraction. So there's 5 main questions here. If you're still stuck on this whole status thing and you're like, wait, I'm questioning the whole idea of government itself, the whole idea of authority. I'm saying that authority, these people we call authority, have no right to rule over us. If you're still questioning that, and you very well might be, these 5 questions that are on the screen might very much help you understand this for yourself. And these are questions, right? And I want you to look into this for yourself. I don't want you to take it from me. I want you to look at the resources that I provide, and I want you to look at these questions and ask yourself these questions and see the answers that you come up here with. Because I think a lot of people intuitively know, and it's a matter of, okay, well, if they intuitively know, then what's going to give them the motivation and the inspiration to bring that into the world and actually act upon it? Not out of fear, but out of courage, out of saying, hey, other people are with me, and I know this is right, so I need to do it. What's gonna start that spark to the fire? And that's what we're going to get to as we move on here. So although we identified the main things we are looking at, we need to get a little bit deeper toward the truth to action and the action to truth. So the movement, right? Because anytime we commit to an action, we are committing to a form of movement. And you may see this as a number of different things, whether you want to call it modern abolitionism, because we're essentially ending slavery in the full, or you want to call it voluntarism because we want, free and voluntary interactions. Well, when I say free, I mean you choose what you want to buy, and the person that is giving you the good is voluntarily also in that interaction giving you the product in return. So, you're giving them your money and they're giving you the product. It's a voluntary interaction, and we do it on a day-to-day basis. We're not forced into any interactions where you must do this by threat of violence, otherwise you're going to get punished, and you have no choice but to obey. Of course, that is how government is formed to begin with, is sort of this monopoly on violence. And so then we're also looking at, nature, and we're looking at natural law, right? So this is essentially the movement, right? Whether you want to say it's abolitionism, voluntarism, or like I mentioned before, agorism. And there's, of course, subcategories to this. Maybe you just want freedom, equality, humanity, or real self-government, which is, us in control of ourselves, because government means mind control, gravana mentis in Latin. So it only makes sense that, you're in control of your own mind. So that's real self-government. And freedom, like I said, most people already want. Equality, well, if you're ending the systems where certain people feel like they innately have the right to rule over you, as did the first government, the Sumerian Empire, with the priest class, who inherently thought that they were given the divine right by God to rule over you. If you shatter that myth, that belief system, that religion of government, then you're essentially creating equality, because you're saying, well, everybody's equal here. No one's special to put them on a pedestal and say, well, they're more special than me, and so, or I'm more special than everyone else, and so I must be the one in charge. It's sort of the sense of ego that you're crushing, and you're not feeding it, and thus you're creating the most optimal equality that there ever can be in nature. Of course, there's going to be inequalities and different conflicts that arise. You're never going to stop or completely halt evil. It's a matter of understanding, well, what's going to feed evil or what's going to feed good. It's a choice of resource. What are we going to put our resources into? We're going to put our resources into the root cause of the problem or to the symptom. We're going to put it towards something good or something bad. What are we putting our resources into? So, sometimes, often the case, if you are symptom management lately, but you have a lot of good resources, all you got to do is move the same resources just toward a different cause, right? And questions might help prompt that situation to saying, wait, maybe we should focus on something else. So when I bolded nature here, why did I do that? Well, we mentioned before, we talked about human nature. We talked about the nature of our world, the nature of government. These are all natures, right? Everything has a nature, the way they be, the way they act. And again, it shouldn't be suppressed. It should be known. When we have knowledge of nature, then we know what's happening in the world around us. So essentially, all these movements, freedom is an aspect of nature. Equality, well, we're already born with all the same rights by God. So essentially, we're all born, equal in that term. And humanity, our humanity, when we say we're losing our humanity or somebody's losing their soul, it's like they're losing their nature. They're becoming detached from who they are. So everything relates back to nature, notice, right? And so natural law, it's an aspect of nature. It's nature's laws. Voluntary interactions, well, it's the nature of us to want to freely go about in our lives. That's freedom. And to choose what we want to do with our lives. Abolitionism, we seek freedom. We might seek some false forms of security, but ultimately, when we're free, we feel best. We feel happy. When we feel it, we're like, this is incredible. and we live it. And we strive and we achieve things that we never thought we would have achieved. It's an exploration, it's a journey, and that's what freedom provides. Freedom provides everything, ultimately. If it wasn't for freedom, you wouldn't have creativity, because you need to think outside the box. You need to think about all the infinite potential that there is. When there isn't freedom and there's control in the brain, then it's like, wait, I can't think outside the box. I'm stuck. I'm in this rigid system, right? So nature is more of a holistic circle where we can expand. And there's a unity to it that we all share, okay? We all share these natural rights. We all share the understanding of natural law. So I believe here that the movement here, although, it is action, it is all essentially based in for nature. It's based on our natures because we require our natures to even commit to such an action, and thus, there's a matter of survival to that I'll get into. But then there's also just nature's itself. We want to make sure that we can keep that variability to do as we wish, to be able to promote who we are. And I think most people want to promote the truth. So the truth is a very relatable word to simply nature itself. Because again, you're looking at something that's universal, timeless, immutable, and not created by humankind. So it's more powerful than anything, and that's why you can relate all the other topics right into nature. So your action essentially creates the movement, right? Well, the movement creates more action. Because when we use the word movement, we're referring to a number of people now, right? So when you take the action and you encourage others to take the action, you're creating the movement. Especially when you just simply take the action, other people see the action, they like it, and it's something that's important and something that should be done. Other people are doing it, you're automatically creating the movement. Now, when you have all these people doing it, well, now that's going to create more action because now it's being seen by more people. So it's this ripple effect of action, movement, movement, action. And so keep that in mind. Every action here is going to contribute to a movement. And your movement is what this movement is of action, right? I want it to be your movement, because when we are all together and we are all promoting that our own sovereignty here, you are in charge. There's no singular figure. There might be some people who are, very vocal. That might be such as yourself. If you understand this knowledge the most, especially, you're going to tend to be more vocal. Some people are going to tend to hear it more, want to hear it more from you, and that's perfectly fine because you have the knowledge. You studied it for a long time. You familiarize yourself with the concepts, and so they're going to look up to you, but you're going to want them to be leaders too, because that's what's going to make you a leader, is the person who says, well, you can be a leader too. And I'll show you the path. I'm not going to use you for my own ego and control. I'm going to bring you up with me. The knowledge is for us all to share. And I'm just simply a fellow messenger to deliver it to you. That doesn't make me any more special than you. So we're all a movement here. And I call it nature's the answer because that's exactly what it is. Again, we're looking at natures of everything. But this is your movement. It's not just mine. And that's why I made a website for it. And you saw on the first slide, nita.one, okay, nature is the answer, .one. And, that is our movement website. It's not my website, okay? It's everybody's website. It's everybody's movement. We're all here together. And we can be this one unifying counter agenda to those who do not belong, to those who are promoting the evil that we see inherently in the world. So we need to be able to face the big aggressor in the room, and thus we need to form a big amount of voice on the opposition to say this is wrong. Just like, again, ending the physical slavery of the past, now we're going to end the mental slavery, and we need to bring that into the minds of the masses, and the way we do that is through amplifying our individual voices and making this a grand scale. Okay, so this is based upon natural law and free will. Okay, and natural law is based upon principles and truth. So natural law is understanding, again, our consequences to our behavior, and free will decides, what we want to do. So when we can align our free will with natural law, we have a brain balance. We have the left brain and the right brain balance, randomness and deterministic. Okay, what that means is that, our actions, we have to decide what we want to do, but we want to make sure that it aligns with the law so that we get the desired result. So when we attack the root cause through statism, and we're putting our actions toward that, we are essentially committing to the movement here, right? Because we're attacking the why with the how. And so it's inherent to human nature to utilize our free will and to understand natural law. And so while natural law is inherent to creation, this movement of us utilizing natural law and our free will that we're given by our human nature is what's going to help us in this process. And so it's represented with, these ideas that we have here. Again, the ideas are more important than the people and the events. We represent those ideas. Anytime we have a tattoo, anytime we do something, we're representing ideas. Every time we do an action, we're representing some sort of idea. People are going to look at the action, they're going to judge you based on that action for some sort of idea. Everything goes back to the ideas, and that's why, again, it's the most important to focus on the ideas. And so natural law is harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding. But when we understand natural law, okay, and we represent that idea within itself, then we are doing the harmonizing, due to integration and promotion, which means we're bringing the knowledge together, we're bringing it to people, we're helping them understand it, and we're promoting those ideas. We're putting it into circulation. We're bringing it to more and more people, thus we're promoting it. And because we're bringing more people together, we're integrating them. We're integrating the ideas, we're integrating the people, we're promoting the people, and we're promoting the ideas. Because again, we're promoting people. People want to be free. People are sick of what they see in the world. Use that to your advantage. People don't like what they see. Well, if they want change, this is an option for them. Is that option going to be present for them? It's like, okay, well, do you have a natural medicine choice or do you have an artificial medicine choice? Which one are you going to choose? Well, at least I have the choice, right? And based upon, what's going to be most effective, what's going to result in the world that I want to see, I'm going to choose. But, this is the same thing here. We're looking at a choice here. But if that choice isn't present, then, they're always going to keep following the system that keeps coming to them. And I'm not saying you have to be there for everybody that, in your community and show that this is a solution that is present, but it is important to be there because then they know that you have this knowledge or that you looked into this or you predicted something that was going to happen. And thus, they're going to look up to you in times of need or times where things are tough and they're saying, wait, you were right about this. Wait, what you said to me about this, it clicked in my brain just now. You were right all this time, and I wanted to say sorry if I lashed on you. Like, you plant the seeds into introducing concepts, again, that are different and new. And you don't have to do it in invasive means, but simply by introducing the new, you will help create innovation. So integration and promotion, we'll talk more about that soon. Now, natural law is universal, right? Because this is something that goes through the whole world and it exists everywhere all the time. And so the movement, though, is voluntarily universal because, your actions, you don't have to commit to them. You don't have to bring truth to people. You could just stick with the truth your whole life and do nothing with it and thus have no legacy. And, it's not about the legacy either, but thus it's not going to go into effect. The truth is not going to be seen to more people and thus you're not going to save millions of lives potentially. A lot of things can happen if you do not bring the truth to people that you see that you want to bring to other people. I'm not forcing you to do anything, right? Because there needs to be underlying motivation. We'll get into that too. But it is a voluntary process. You choose the actions that you want to take here. All right, and I'm going to give you many different choices of action, and some are going to appeal to you more than others, but as long as you're taking action toward the truth, and you feel like you're contributing enough, and you see the impact in your own life, then I think you're doing pretty darn good if you ask me, right? I mean, you can't beat yourself down and saying, I'm not doing enough, but at the same time, you do need to motivate yourself and say, man, I need to do more. I need to do more for the truth. If I see it's important, especially in a time such as now, man, I need to bring this to more people. And so this movement is also generational and foundational because we can pass this through the generations. If it is the truth, again, it's going to last forever. We need to then bring it to people either way. And if we just keep sharing it to bring it to more people, eventually, there will be a generation of many people who will just, blow the doors out wide open. They will be the ones who really change things and put into effect. And we'll talk about that more too as well. But generational, share it with your kids. They're going to be the ones to change the world. Looking at the younger generations, but not just that, but sharing it, among the generations. That way nothing ever dies. It just keeps going on, and it's foundational because we're looking at, what created life itself. We're looking at natural law. We're looking at everything that exists, and, that's inherent, that affects us, that is going to what our effects do to the world. So it's foundational. We're looking at something that we create. We, all of us create. So it's generational and foundational. The foundation is us. The foundation is what the movement is. Nature is the answer. It's, it's natural law. That's the foundation, right? Very simple. And it exists and applies since it's human nature, creation, recognition. Again, what that means is using your human nature and recognizing that, yes, the truth is there, the law is all there. And our creation, when we create materials on behalf of these ideas, we represent these ideas, then we're putting it into recognition. We're recognizing. We're making people think because we're introducing, again, new material. So it exists and applies as long as we keep producing new material, keep bringing it out to people, keep using our human nature. So we can, again, promote nature is the answer. You don't have to join this movement or anything like that. I'm using this as a case example for the actions that we're taking here. I'm using this movement as a case example. It is a real movement, and you can, represent it and all so forth if you want. But I'm using this as an example. And it's, of course, best unchanged. If you have any blueprint to change the world and you have any movement and saying, well, this is like the simple structure that we want to have, and saying, well, this is what we want to focus on, this is what we want to do, generally, that's best unchanged, because that way we're all on the same page. Now, of course, there's going to be always some small minor changes, but if the general premises always stays like natural law, the ideas themselves, then I think we're pretty darn good. But if it steers past a whole different direction, then it's not so much the movement anymore, right? Now we're moving to something else. So that's why we have the foundation of the website, of the materials, of the ideas, and they're set in stone. There's something called the share sheet. These are all things that allow it to be not just unchanged, but foundational and thus generational, shared with other people, help them recognize what this is, who we are, why I'm with all these other people, why we're together a movement, why we're committing to certain actions. And that's what a movement helps us do. And when you see this slide, you're probably like, whoa, what is going on here? But this kind of summarizes everything when it comes to natural law, when it comes to the movement. And what I added as a section here is multiplicative expression. And so we have positive expression in natural law, which is love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, and order, in that order. And for negative, we have fear, ignorance, confusion, control, and chaos. And I mentioned this previously before. You can look at this more for yourself if you want, but I'm going to read just the middle column here. Courage is required for love. You need to protect love. You need to care to act and be. You need to care in order to love somebody, in order to heal them. Courage is involved because there's bravery in order to fight for love, in order to fight for what you believe to be true. Okay? And not just believe to be true, but again, know to be true. Knowledge, and that's where knowledge comes in. Conversation, to share that knowledge, is the most simplest action you can do. It's the exempling of showing that you have the knowledge. Any form of social communication, I'm doing it with you right now. And responsibility, I have a moral obligation to share this with others. I have a moral obligation to make this presentation. And there's direction. Thus, because I take responsibility of my own life, I have direction. And that is my internal monarchy, mono, one, ruler, archon. I'm in control of myself. I'm sovereign. I realize that it's my responsibility to be in control of myself, and my responsibility to have this knowledge in order to share it with others in the world that needs it. So it's my moral obligation to share it with them. That's my direction of my focus to go. Again, focusing on the main action for the main problem. Guidance for freedom. People say, well, okay, we don't want control, so we want freedom. Doesn't mean there aren't some guidelines. There's always going to be guidelines. That's the whole point of understanding natural law. Natural law is always present, and that's what actually helps us create real order, as it says below. But we need to have guidance, and so people being there with the knowledge, sharing that knowledge, again, generationally, and using our conscience, utilizing voluntarism, okay, and that's what's going to express our freedom, saying that, yeah, I am free to make decisions as I wish. I am free to decide the actions that I believe are good, that I know are good, and that I know are bad. I'm going to stay away from them. I'm using my conscience. I'm not going to suppress that for order following. So I'm guiding myself, I'm guiding others, and thus we're going to create a free world, because it's based in voluntarism, conscience. It's based in, again, nature, human nature. Positive expression then comes of guidance, and that is everything of love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, and order. essentially manifested natural law, knowledge of natural law. That's what it is, because when you have these aspects and understanding, well, okay, yeah, knowledge is important for my own self-ownership. If I don't know that I own myself, then I won't own myself, If I don't know how to own myself, then, well, I'm not going to own myself. That is natural law within itself. Whether you want to call it natural law or not, most people generally know a lot of this at the end of the day themselves. It's the reason why we call it common sense, and common sense is conscience. It's to know together. And when we know certain inherent truths that are supposed to be ever so present and so simple, no wonder why we don't have to call it natural law. It's something that we should already know. And so some people will already know this, and they'll look over this and they'll say, oh, well, I already know all this. I don't need to know more about it. But connecting it, going all the way for truth, is understanding what statism is and its immoral impact on the world, and that it contributes to chaos and negative natural law expression. So we don't want that. And what's required here of the multiplicative expression, of the courage, the conversation, the responsibility, and the guidance, is organization, communication, graphic design, presentation, audio, video, website, networking, marketing and promotion, knowledge of the real enemy, again, the one problem, the main problem, service to truth, courage and persistence in practical real-world skills. Okay, again, it's not all up to me to help you decide, but we're going to go deeper into this as we move on in this presentation to tell you more of everything you need to know. You use this as a guide through everything that you're doing. I think this can become very helpful for you. Now, what this movement is, right? Unity. That's what it is. We're bringing people together to the same knowledge. That's what I truly define as unity, and that's how I say that word on the top there. And it also represents nature as the answer, as you see the words, the letters NITA, right? But I combined A and E because AE actually also represents laws of nature. So I see this in many different ways, and that's why I use those letter combinations. You can use it the same as well, since we are all part of this movement. And I created this movement in particular because we need difference for difference. Again, we need to promote the different to get a different condition in the world. And what we're using here in this movement is very special things that you're not going to see with other movements, that you're not going to see with most people taking actions in collective groups. And that is, we have the share sheet, which bypasses censorship and confusion. If they get rid of the website, it doesn't matter. The share sheet is the foundation. It's what holds the movement. It's what constitutes the movement, essentially. But it's very simple. You don't even probably need the share sheet. It's nature's the answer. Boom. That's the answer to the question, okay, what is the movement about? It says it right there. It's generational and relatable. Most people understand nature is the answer. You ask them, they generally understand it and they can relate to it. It's generational because it's only going to grow relevant as time moves on. As technology emerges, as man seeks to be more of God and deciding what certain people should do with their bodies, with their lives, it's going to grow more apparent that people need to utilize their nature and don't let it go away, and also, don't have it get destroyed. There's going to be a great standing for what nature is itself, how it always wins, how it always, beats modern artificial medicine, how it's essentially who we are. We don't want to lose it. It's the innocence factor of us. There's a lot of connections you can make that make it so much relatable and generational. And there's no join to this. Again, it's just a matter of contribution. The more you contribute to it, the more you represent the idea that is nature is the answer, well, the more that you're promoting the movement itself. Because again, nature is the answer. That is the movement. So you simply saying it, you simply putting in videos, you simply putting it on websites, whatever, is your contribution. That's your quote-unquote join, if you want any join. That is what your join is. Very simple, right? It's simply a matter of contribution. So what you choose to put more into is what you choose to be more a part of. Very simple. It's what we do in everyday life. And that's why this is very much inherent to human nature, very complementary. It's just a simple guide, just as this presentation is. And so everyone is in charge. You have the custom ability. You can custom anything here. The materials on Nature is the Answer, its website. Anybody can contribute to that as long as it's universal knowledge. It stays with the message as the mission, which is Nature is the Answer. Then it's relevant to what the mission is and the message. And we're all here to guide each other. None of us are special, and the whole idea that we're sharing is that none of us are special and that nobody should rule over another human being. So it makes sense to say, well, you can be a guide, you can be a guide, you get a free car, you get a free car. But no, everybody can be guides, because we are all natural born leaders inside, and it's just a matter of invoking that, bringing that out of us, and understanding, well, maybe I excel in leadership here, maybe another person excels in leadership there. We all contribute one way or another, but we don't push others down for our own ego and use them for control, like I mentioned before. What we have in this movement is also universal concepts. We're not just looking at natural law, we're looking at natural health, we're looking at natural rights and names, right? We're looking at everybody is a fellow messenger, and the movement itself, it's universal. Nature is something everybody can relate to, any religion, okay, God, nature, boom, easy. Unite, it's bringing the world together. It's all universal. Everything in the blueprint is meant to be universal, and it's unique, it's new, it's simple, and it's clear. I think that's particularly what makes it most effective here. It's rooted, it's based in nature. What more gets to the root, and it's standing for what is. Again, it's representing the idea of truth, which is what is, and it's representational. It has a representational flag, right? Because that's what you can use to help represent the idea that nature is the answer, because it's basically just an NITA. And it has a modernity to it, which is the website in the corner, so that way people can find more about the information themselves. So when you wave the flag, they don't have to necessarily ask you what it's about, although that's good that you speak on behalf of what you are sharing. The website will also bring people to the information, so the flag could stand for itself, and it has a modern twist to it. So there's a binding, creed to what the flag is, and people understand what it is, and it brings them to the knowledge of understanding statism. So if you don't, the flag will. And so I think it has a lot of magic just in that process alone. And the message is the mission. This is the movement. Unlike other movements where it's not clear, this is really clear. It is the answer. Nature is the answer. What more needs to be said? Any question you ask, again, nature is the answer. So the message is the mission. That's what our goal is. It's to understand that it is the answer. Natural law is the answer. Natural health is the answer. And no matter how many years it may take to understand it in the fullest, it's always been the striving goal for humanity to understand the truth and understand our nature. So a particular movement, this blueprint of a movement to change the world, it basically outlives all else, all other movements. And the conflict or difference is in practice compared to other movements, especially with similar intent. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the numbers here, I have a whole list here why it basically outlives all else. You're looking at education for the mass public, and it's not like some fight, for truth. And when I mean fight, okay, we'll get to the fight process, we'll get to that, because there is a part of time where you do have to stand up and fight for your rights and your belonging in nature, and saying, well, I'm not a slave, I'm not going to put up with this. But that's not the immediate and first action. That's the later action that comes after, other actions. And we're going to get to that as well. But we're only defending what is here, right? We're not introducing anything new. We're simply saying, well, this is what's all around us. Simply open your eyes and see. That's all. It's education. It's awareness. And so then number 2 is the focus on morality. We're looking at rights, and that is more important than health. Some people want to say, well, health is really important because that's what's used to control people. But again, if you don't care to heal somebody in the first place, you're not going to heal them. You're not going to want to heal them. The doctors are not going to care about somebody's body. They're just going to follow orders as well. And thus, health is no concern. Morality must be in the picture. People must care about one another, in this world. They must care to do something, care to watch this presentation. Otherwise, they don't care, and they're not going to do anything about it, and they're not going to utilize it at all. It's all about care. That's the binding principle in natural law, as Mark Passio puts it. He says it's the 8th binding principle of natural law. You can look into that more if you wish. Number 3 is numbers of people, not money. A lot of these organizations and so-called movements out there, that's why I put it in quotes, because, a lot of people criticize the idea of movements and joining other people together, but numbers of people happen naturally when you're sharing something that's truthful and important. And when you want to bring more people to that knowledge, you help, bind people to that idea, so you can help people feel a sense of belonging, that they're not alone, and that they can share it with more and more people, and that they're in this together. So numbers of people, not money. We're not looking at, okay, well, let's get this amount of donations for this. And sure, there's always money in the picture. People are always going to pitch money towards certain things. That's always going to exist, but it's not going to be the focus. The focus here is people. The focus is ideas, but the focus is ideas with numbers of people. Otherwise, those ideas, of course, can't be expressed. Ideas that people have. So those ideas are dependent on people, and thus, again, the truth is dependent on actions, dependent on what actions people take toward the truth. And so number 4 is non-focus on any symptom issue. Again, we're getting to the root cause, which is statism, the main problem. Number 5, actions with or without coordination. So if you don't want to join meetings or do anything too fancy, well, you could just simply put a flag on your lawn. You can just simply have different works of your own, whether it's painting or putting out a video or anything that may or may not require coordination, both. You have the option to do as you wish in this movement. There's no strict guideline and saying, well, you have to do this and do that and contribute and pay money here, and none of that. This is an actual just movement, which is literally just actions combined in the aggregate. So number 6, groups naturally created can each make their own smaller goals if need be, while actively pursuing and promoting the greatest of all goals, which is, again, understand the main problem and the main action. So although there's main actions and there's main problems, there's always going to be those smaller actions and smaller problems present, but the goal is to always focus on the main action and the main problem, regardless. Number 7, statism or order following is worse than all the other issues. That's understanding, again, the why. Number 8 is getting signatures is useless, divisive, and creates targets. When all these other movements and organizations ask for people's address and locations, and you're making people threats and making them vulnerable and saying, well, this is where you can get us. And I think it's a privacy issue as well. It's useless because, again, if we want to change the world, it relies on all of us, not select few, and saying, well, we're special and you're not, and making these divisive barriers, but rather, okay, we already are all the movement, and it's just a matter of contribution, right? So it's totally different in the way we view things than the way other movements do. And again, not to say we versus them, but that's why I put the movement in quotes. We're just representing actions here, and actions combined in manifested effect. So we don't want to create targets here. We want to realize that we're all, the change here, as Gandhi said. And Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., for example, might have made themselves a little too much of prominent figures of their own, whereas they could be inspiring other people to also be leaders of their own and speak up as well at their own rallies, at their own, events. That way they're not the central figure who can just get assassinated and boom, the whole movement is gone. You don't want that to happen. You want people to carry this on forever and to saying, yeah, India will remain independent, America will remain independent, we will always be free from government tyranny. And that will persist and rely on people having this movement and this resistance through generations of knowledge. And so it requires knowledge. Even Jefferson says, knowledge is the only sure reliance to the preservance of our liberty. So that is very telling for what we got to do. And number 9 is think big, talk big, seek big, not political, and make it fun. Very key aspects, I would say, especially in today's world. People want to have fun. People always do want to have fun. Or at least I hope. And, people don't want to be I'm super sensitive. I'm afraid you're going to hurt my feelings. But just have fun, right? Just be free. Have fun. Do your thing. Be respectful. Clear the air. Make disclaimers if you have to. But always have fun in the process. That is a truthful thing to do, is express your freedom. And don't make it political. Politics is what we're seeking to get rid of or go away from in the first place. And most people don't like politics for the very reason that it basically takes away fun, takes away freedom, and is too like, oh, if you don't agree with me, then you're this, and doing a debate, and so we need to discuss and see who is in the better position. No, seek consensus, not difference, and seek the bigger picture. Talk big. Trump talks about this a lot, but it's effective nonetheless, regardless of who he is or whatever. You talk big, you think big, and you're going to achieve big. And that is a key aspect here, and that's why I look toward that bigger picture. I say, yeah, it is possible we can change the world. Although it's a big world and there's a lot of people and a lot of things going on, I think it's totally possible. It first requires the mindset that it is. And a lot of people who know the truth do not have that mindset. And that's a troublesome thing. Because if we want to share the truth, we need to first have that mindset that yes, it's possible, and we can look at this bigger picture. We can see the optimistic point of view. It's totally possible to change the world, and that depends on all of us. Okay? So each individual has creative works of their own, and that's like, each individual's investment. When they put something towards something, they're going to feel like they have a little bit more personal investment. I'm more attached to what I'm doing now, because I contributed to it. And I think it's a great part about the customability factor about this. Also, the fact that you essentially are, this is your movement, you are a leader as well. Then there's the appeal to nature, or through individual desire or interest for all. A lot of people, they understand things when you put it and connect it to nature, and that's why, nature is the answer. And through individuals' desire and their interests, which always seems to rely on some form of freedom or some form of returning back to their nature in one way, shape, or form. And you can use that as a bridge for conversation or a bridge into understanding statism with folks. Number 12 is the republic or constitution is bound to fail. There's no again if inherent. For example, we see in the movement of Make America Great Again, just the word usage we use can be very troublesome. So, be wary of the words you use. Like how I say we, you're all the movement. I'm not saying I, this is me. And things like that can show people, well, we're in this together. Like if you're healing somebody's body and you're being a health coach, and you want them to realize, well, this is a journey that you're also on, and you will help them through this because it's it's something that you're also working on. You're always learning every day. You're not set stone on everything that you do. You always want to learn more, and you always question yourself if you're wrong, and thus you make it to them as if you're in the same position as them, and ultimately we are. We're always in the same position if we truly have an open mind. And so when we use words like MAGA, we have to question, well, no, freedom is already with us. We're great. Well, what defines how great we are? I mean, yeah, as a human species, we're great. We've done a lot of things. What do you mean again? Are we not great? Well, it's because of the problems that we created in the world. And is those problems because of the system that's in place, or is it actually just the inherent nature of the system that's in place, which gets to the root cause, again, gets to statism, gets to the very nature of government. So not republic or constitution, but rather, government itself. All forms of government, essentially republics or forms of monarchy, constitutions. Well, every country has their different form of constitutions, and that's basically just written words on a piece of paper that are supposed to just really just talk about stuff that is already inherent, natural law, essentially. So why don't we just look at natural law itself, instead of the Constitution, which then gets added additions to it and has all these other things which aren't so universal. So you have to question, it's not that we're looking at republic or constitution. We're looking at freedom. We're looking at truth, natural law. We're looking at nature, the world, and not just one select nation. And we're not looking at, again, we're looking at inherence, what's inherent to our world, and realizing and simply becoming more conscious of what is here and already for us to understand. No joining, again, nature is already with all, so it's simply a matter of contribution. Nature's the answer is an inherent condition. There's nothing we can do about that. It's a matter of contribution and recognizing that it's there and putting our actions to the test of sharing that with people, just as we do with natural law or anything else that we see as evident, as we do with the actions that we talk about. Going places with lots of people. Well, this would be essential, right, if we want numbers of people together, and we'll talk more about that as well. But that includes coordinated events, and being active, never giving up, making sure you always go at it for the truth. And that is always important. You don't want to say, okay, well, I give up, I'm not going to do this anymore. You want to stay consistent. Consistency is key for every natural leader. And it's always important that you coordinate things with other people, you make group decisions with other people, you're very transparent, you're honest. It always just helps in the process toward the truth. You want to be truthful to yourself first above all things, and you want to fix things within your own life first before you go out to the rest of the world. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of conflicts when you go out to the rest of the world. So you have your problems, you have your solutions, you have your movement to amplify your solutions. We've identified our objectives, we identified our focus, but here now we have to look at your cause, because, well, essentially learning natural law is learning cause and effect, and we want to make an effect in the world, and we want to do so with our movement, with our actions, and knowing the problem and knowing those solutions definitively for what they are. But you do have a cause, and your cause is really meaningful. It's your own. And this is what simply defines your cause. Number one, we have moral obligation. Number two, we have inspiration. And number three, we have the survival of natures. Now, first of all, number one, moral obligation is sort of this aspiration, what you seek to be, what you seek to aspire to. Right? It's not about, oh, this is what I seek to be in the image that I want in my ego. It's not about that, but rather doing it out of the greater good, doing it out of the hearts that you have for the future of the world, doing it because there's so many reasons to, that you're doing it actually selflessly. It's a moral obligation. You feel like you are obligated to take a certain action due to the morality of the situation, which is knowing that the world is an inherent evil, and it has inherent breaches upon our natural rights. There is a lot of violations on what is right, what is good, and so you want to bring the good to people. You feel is your moral good obligation, your obligation to bring the morals, your moral obligation. And the question that really comes to mind here when you question, well, what is the moral obligation here? Who has a moral obligation? Well, it's when that person asks themselves, who else will do it when it needs to be done? See, when something needs to be done that's not being done, or again, if certain things are being seen by yourself and you don't see it in other people, and they're not being the change, so you want to be the change, and that's why you're watching this presentation, you might ask yourself, well, who else will do it? This is the reason why I do my work, right? Because who else is going to do it if it's not for me, right? I am the one who recognizes this knowledge, so I'm going to have to put it into action because I have this knowledge and nobody else does. It's moral obligation to share it with other people, to bring it to more people, so that way they can also understand it for themselves, especially if the knowledge belongs with them. Okay, so number two is inspiration. That energy is important, not just the energy in the presentation like this alone, but the presentation of you simply being with somebody, showing your energy for who you are and standing on behalf of the truth and yourself, and contributing to the world that we have in, today. Contributing. What is your contribution? If I look up your name on the internet, what do I see? And your energy, well, that has to do with food too. Do you have the fuel to fuel yourself up for the cause that you know is true, that you need to bring to other people? This all is contributing factors to not just yourself, but your own contribution externally. So internal contribution, external contribution, both very important and both for one another. Do contribute, but have the energy. And if you're with other energetic people, it's gonna inspire you to have a lot more energy, right? And so if you also energize them, they might energize you, or you're gonna attract that similar energy. This is all a matter of energy, right? It's the principle of vibration of natural law. Everything's a matter of pure vibratory energy. So then number three is survival of natures, because what it will come down to, if there needs to be things that needs to get done, it's a survival of man. We need to think in order to keep thinking. It's, again, using your human nature not to lose nature. Because we have this born ability to think, to be in charge of our own life, and we feel the need that we're on this edge of survival for those very things when those very things are being attacked. And so when it comes down to, okay, the whole world isn't thinking for themselves, it's going to come down to a matter of survival of natures, of who's going to be the ones to think and who's the ones that don't. Your cause is a survival cause. You want people to survive. You don't want people to die. So it's all a form of moral obligation, inspiration, and survival. That is the combination for your cause. One way or another, it always is. And this is due to, however, the 10 questions. So that way, if you don't think this is maybe your cause, these 10 questions will help you understand that it actually is. And these 10 questions are as follows. Number 1, are you not able to live your life to its fullest and, to be content with what we do? And if you might answer yes, for example. In a world where, there is a lot of evil, there's a lot of manifestations that are of the negative natural law expression. If you don't know what that is, it means that the world is in a state of either fear, control, confusion, or chaos. And we covered some aspects of that before. Number 2, is the world in need of change or very problematic? Well, going down the same route, we're going to say yes again. Now, is our humanity, our nature being compromised? This goes back to the idea of survival, who we are. The answer is yes in this case of scenario, especially under an entire system, which is, again, backed by a belief system that is both unnatural and immoral. Number 4, are you free from the control or restriction of other people? Okay, and here we have both. And the reason why is because truly, naturally, in reality, you are free as a human being, but it's our very own belief systems that makes it seem like we're not. And, if you want to relate this to say, okay, well, mentally people are enslaved. They are being controlled, but physically, they're not technically enslaved. And technically, they're always a matter of, yeah, we are free, but only if we come to recognize it. So it's a matter of both, okay? And it's more so a spectrum of, are we moving toward more control or moving toward more freedom? Same thing with, what is natural, what is unnatural through my classification system. Something that is more unnatural has more denaturing elements affecting what is somebody who is inherently natural. We're inherently natural human beings, and we're going to be prone to change through mechanisms that are going to change us. And so, that's going to affect our nature. And so then we have number 5. Do we all technically create our shared common world, and which is essentially our movement, right? Because again, this is our shared actions. Movement is this shared action that we have together. Do we all technically create it? And the answer for this one is both. Because we're using the word technically here because we do create the shared world that we have, but it does rely on everybody. And, do we technically create it? Well, the laws are in progress. So it's a matter of both. It's not just left brain or right brain, like we're science, we can do whatever we want. But it's also not we're religion and everything is ruled by God and, all our actions are essentially meaningless. He controls everything. It's a matter of both. Understanding, okay, well, yeah, we have this something called free will and there's something called natural law. And we need to align the two. So again, it's a matter of both. Now, number 6, can we change the world? And these questions, you're going to notice every question 6 to 10 is going to relate to the questions that were above. Okay, so there's 5 questions above and 5 questions below. And number 6 says, can we change the world? So based on the other questions I asked, you have to question, well, can we change the world? Well, if we all technically create the shared world, then you likely can. See, it's a matter of this is personal understanding these 10 questions because, again, this is your cause, your movement, and your actions. Number 7, how can we change the world? Well, we talked about what humanity is in need of, right? We talked about what change needs to be done, that there's problems present. So this gives us a sense of what our actions should be naturally without me even having to tell you. Number 8, what would you look for in a movement? And this is also dependent on what's above. Okay, because again, what is it that humanity needs to do? There's requirements involved. So it relies on the above questions that we technically already covered and you already answered, and that's why you technically know the answers to these questions as well. Number 9, what should be the focus to succeed and make an impact? Well, if I asked you, well, what should be the focus, for a movement? What should be the focus in changing the world? And you say, okay, well, people need to love each other more. They need to, listen to one another more. They need to be open-minded and not so constricted in mindset. This all goes back down to the similar ideas we have here of understanding a shared common world around universal truths being free from control or restriction, not being compromised by these belief systems and these unnatural systems. This all goes into relationship, and it all ties into what is essentially the final question here. What if you are the movement, sharing with others a common message as mission? Nature is the answer, about nature, which is universal, simple truths or needs. And this really ties in all the questions together. I suggest you look over this for yourself, because you'll notice I color code the words on purpose to make the connections between the first 5 questions and the final 5 questions at the bottom, right? And that final question really sums up everything here. What's going to make an impact? What do you look for in a movement? And everything there in that last question sums up, well, what if you are the movement sharing with others this message and this is what you're doing? And you say, okay, well, this makes sense now because I answered, these questions initially on my own. And now I connected the dots, and this is what we must do. So this is important for your cause, for you to figure out for yourself. Again, I use nature as the answer as a template here, and you have actions of your own in your own life, and you understand this movement and its intentions and why it was created because of these questions I ask you. And the reason why I say it's a natural way to change the world is because it's based on these questions, which I believe you can answer yourself. These are things that we all understand in our own lives to a sense, and that's what we want to latch on to if we all desire a similar world, is the similar need. Okay, well, that's the marketing strategy. That's the target market. Right? You want to find people who are like-minded, who are feeling the same way, and say, oh, you know what, we do need to change things, and we can do this together. Because we all think the same, so all we got to do now is act the same. Right? But we have to have that intention to set in stone, the courage and the bravery to do so. The people seeing that we have other people, with us on board with the same thing. That is where the movement comes in. And so there's 3 factors here at work. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a clip from my presentation, Truth to Action. This was a presentation I did in person with people at a club, at Freedom Club, and then I also did some recording online. So I'm going to give you a clip here, and you're going to watch all talking about what these 3 main factors are. So how do we do it? My solution as we continue here, the natural way to change the world, as I mentioned, which is also on my website, and you can find more on nita.one/steps. There's 3 main steps to the actions here. Number 1 is representation. And that requires creativity, because anytime you create a form of imagery or art form or expression of an internal or really central idea, such as nature is the answer, there needs to be something that represents that. So for nature is the answer, quite evidently, it would be nature, right? Because that's what it's trying to represent. So a designated, universal, self-created movement and flag or media presence, anything that will help you represent this idea, this message as mission. That is what helps it, this movement grow. That's what helps create more impact in your actions, saying this is what I'm a part of. Look at all the other people a part of this, and we can move forward together in the right direction. And this direction is the idea that we are currently representing through our materials. And that's why it requires creativity. So number 2, all those people that I mentioned, is the essential part of networking, and that requires guidance, right? Because we have to work with one another, and that's what I call demonstration. Okay, so we have representation, demonstration. The final one will be presentation. Okay, so while we have numbers of people and we have materials to show who we are and what we do and what we're representing, the final one is education, which is really important because of conversation about statism, right? As we mentioned. And that requires courage, because we're facing a system of people, not just government, of people who are the ones who create government through their beliefs. And they don't control the government, but they have the government control them, this, entity that doesn't actually exist, but they give credence to in their mind, and so thus we have to break the mental barriers, and that requires a lot of courage. It requires presentation of new information that people never seen, so they can think innovatively and challengingly, so they can move forward in the future with something that is even better than they've ever had. Right? Because that's the whole point of delivering new information, is to understand, well, was I wrong, and can I move forward with a better understanding of the world? Right? So self-control, aka statism, aka natural law, rights, health, etc. All those things you want to educate people about, right? So being in control of themselves, understanding the land they live on, and that they're in control of their life. They need to be self-responsible. These things that, by the way, usually, should be taught to kids from parents. And people often learn within their daily lives as they grow up, but need to realize that the government is not their mommy and daddy either, and that they own their lives. And that statism is a very dangerous belief system and contributes to forms of democide and all the other reasons I mentioned before, and how natural law ties into that, natural rights, and our health, which goes along all the same logic, by the way, which is that you own your own body. Only you can truly, help your own body. People can recommend. They can't force your body to do something, because then that's not health. Health means whole. It's recognizing the whole of the being. Someone's mindset is very important to their healing process. It's not just what you give them. And so people need to be on board, with what you're doing, and to understanding what you're doing to their own body so things don't go wrong. Health is always best as a self-responsibility too, or simply with knowledge of what is going on in the body. If you don't have knowledge of what's going on, then the doctor is not going to treat your body as they should, and thus you're not going to end up as well as you should, right? You're taking moreover chances, and chances are basically increments of knowledge that is unknown, if you want to summarize what chances are. Now, if we look at these three main steps, representation, networking, and education, which is also representation, demonstration, and presentation, we can otherwise put that as two main steps. And that is integration, which is with nature, right? Which is with all of us getting together and coming together and bringing everything together. And then number two, which is promotion of those said things, of nature, of us coming together, of, natural law, rights, and health. So integration, bringing it to people and connecting all these things together, and then promotion, which is having it carry through the generations, you may see, and having it carry to more new people who are in the dark, people not exposed to this knowledge, people who are opposing. And so all that for what is disintegration and demotion. From what? That which shouldn't be, that which doesn't be, and that would be the denatured or government. And demotion from what? What creates government? Statism. Right? So what creates nature? Natural law, rights, health. What creates government? Statism. Dependence, lack of self-responsibility. So you can see what feeds what. And that is where promotion comes for integration and demotion comes for disintegration. Integration and promotion for disintegration and demotion. These two go hand in hand. It's called adding in to crowd out. If you add in the good, the bad will crowd out naturally. You do the same thing with the body when it comes to healthy foods, or foods that generally will feed the body versus deplete the body and give it sickness and disease and illness. So disintegrate from that which doesn't help you and is not intended for your body or not intended for the world, and demote that. Don't eat that food anymore. Don't participate in things that are going to make you sick. It's the same thing with the world. Don't participate in things that are going to contribute to mass slavery and death. So demotion and disintegration with promotion and integration. So integration and promotion of what's good, disintegration and demotion from what's bad. Now, based on the clip that you just saw, you'll see that this diagram sort of puts it all together. And you'll see we start with representation of having an idea, right? The idea is what starts it all. That is our focus for our cause, for our actions, for the solutions. And so we have that idea, but that idea needs to make an impact, right? That idea needs to do something. We need to do something with that idea. We need to bring it to other people. That idea needs to do something. What makes that idea impactful? Well, it's got to be a relevant idea, something that people can relate to, and thus there's education involved too. Why is it relatable? Why is it so important? And that's going to create the impact. And then from there, you have the networking or integration. Okay, so in networking, obviously you're bringing people together, and that's the integration and the ideas together. That's the integration from the education. Okay, that's why we go representation, education, networking in that order, and then it keeps going in that order, just non-stop. And that's why we have this road here on this diagram. You notice we're going straight up the road here, but we're going representation, education, networking, and we're evening out to having all three in our direction on the road to truth. That's why this is a road. And you'll notice if you tilt your head here, you'll see on the diagram, it says in very small letters there, center, balance, focus, because again, we're trying to get all three aspects within our action steps, and we do it the best we can. And at the same time, there's also the letters and beneath that little line that says pyramid disintegration, which means that as we move on toward the truth, promoting and integrating all these ideas, we are naturally disintegrating and demoting from the ideas that don't belong. So again, this sums up everything that we just talked about in that previous clip. Okay, so this diagram pretty much depicts it all for you. And that circles to represent that holistic balance with that center focus that's saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to disintegrate from this pyramid system that be. We're going to make a world based in actual unity, which is really just living our lives, being free from all systems of mass control and slavery and mass democide. So this is holistic. This is collective individual. We're not looking at just the individual. We're not just looking at the collective. We're looking at both, and people contribute as much as they wish. There's no imbalance or extreme focus. This is the road to action. And I call it the movium, the way of movements. It's just a fancy word for what I wanted to title this diagram. And this is here another slide talking about what is called rallies. And you've probably seen many rallies in your lifetime, but I'm going to give you another clip of what these rallies might be. What uses all three steps? Rallies. Now, you may say, okay, well, we're bringing mass amounts of people together then in that case. And I say, yeah, so that's integration. And then, well, where's the other two? Okay, so if you have public events with use of the current networks, we're using integration. If it uses all three steps, though, okay? So rallies can use all three steps, but because it's still dependent on the people who are holding the rally. And here's an example. You can see a rally in the picture that I have here on the screen. And there's people in the crowd, but they have a whole bunch of different signs, and there's not really a central sign that is really amplifying as a voice here. So anybody who's new to this demonstration might ask and say, well, what in the world is going on? I can't look into this more for myself. If I want to look more into the resources, there's no particular website or anything like that, and I can't know how to join it so I can follow these guys and go to one of their rallies one day. So there needs to be a follow-up process and something that amplifies these voices. And that is where education and representation comes in. Representation would be if these people had a central flag or central message and idea that was shared among all these people. And they used these materials because these materials would help waken up those in the dark, and because they were all using it, it has a greater effect and chance to wake up more of the people in the dark, or more of the people that they want to reach. And education would, of course, be where that material leads, or where this demonstration leads, because all these people coming together is great, and having all the representation materials and flags and stuff are great, but that has to bring people to something in order for their minds to actually change, in order for the world to change. So there needs to be education in these efforts. Now, maybe the speakers are educational, or some of the people in the crowds are educational, but what is educational? You can say project fear or save our rights, as some of the signs say in this picture, but where could people learn more about their rights? What's going to tell them where their rights come from? What's going to promote love? This is where the education comes in. There needs to be resources present that people can see, that people can act on and look into for more for themselves. And then there's news stories and all this stuff popping up about these ideas. And then these ideas go viral. So it becomes a more amplified thing. This is where we can take our actions and make it even bigger. And it's greatly helped when we have a lot of people. So integration, education, and representation, such crucial aspects. So what is missing from this rally? Education and representation. Because what you have here is integration, mass people coming together. Great. And naturally out of this, you might have some education, you might have some representation, but they're not core, they're not central, and they can't be seen from the outskirts. How can rallies continue? When you have an amplification of those singular things that is brought more to light, and thus more people can carry that on and say, let's do this in our own town, because this is the structure that we can now apply to the structure that we have in our own cities, in our own towns, in our own communities. So they take that as an example to say, well, we can do this here, right? And we can use the same resources to do so, which allowed them to do it there. And people are inspired, and people say, well, wait, look, they're across the world now. This movement is everywhere. And it just keeps growing from there. So this is where rallies can come really helpful. Then we have here education, and here's another clip. When we talk about education, what's a good example of this? Well, my website, nita.one, and you can go to /advanced, tons of educational material. Boom, that's the education. Okay, you got videos, study guides, slides, books. I got a lot of different book references on there as well. Now, upon enhancing that education, what you have is all of these different materials. So you have shirts, you have business cards, you have signs, flags, infographics. Look how much you can do with simply education alone. You know, people might not look at this as a very impactful action step, but it is actually the most impactful. And as we identified in that presentation, Truth to Action, education is the most important, because how do you share, knowledge? It is through the form of conversation. And what beats a belief? Well, it's knowledge. And if we are beating a belief here, and we are understanding the unnatural belief systems, the immoral belief systems that exist, we need to beat it with knowledge. And knowledge comes through education. Education can come best through conversation, but it could also come best through, again, all the different types of learning. So you and your expertise is going to be somewhere in between here. You might like holding events. You might like making signs. You might like making forms of art, and maybe even cooking something, doing something special to educate people about these similar ideas, but in different ways. Again, it's an allocation of resources toward the same cause, and that's what makes it so great and amplified. And essentially all these different things, interviews and having different forms of content and media content as well, using technology to your advantage, going on platforms that you oppose, but going on those platforms to expose them from the inside out, setting up stands, art forms, and talk to the people who are inside this pyramid system, everybody, because this is important knowledge for everybody. We're all humanity. And essentially it's all forms of advertising, because what you're doing is you're showing, look guys, this is what it is. It's just like the tree standing out in the woods. It's advertising a very important part of life. It's saying, here's the source of oxygen, here's the source of lumber, here am I to stand firm, grounded. It's representing what it is. And we need to represent who we are. We're human beings, and we're not going to give up our free will. We're not going to give up our freedom, our humanity. We're going to stand up for it. So we're going to advertise our nature. And that's why, it's not like you're joining some movement. You are contributing to it. It's a matter of how much you recognize that nature is the answer, and how much you put into action to sharing that message as mission with others. That's what makes it the mission, is because you understand the message. And so when you understand the education yourself, you can best bring it to others. But even if you understand simple aspects of this education, some of the most important basics, and you don't delve super deep into it to alienate yourself, you can still bring that to other people, and you can do so in the best ways you can with these different forms of materials to help guide you on your speaking with other people. And to say, look, if you don't want to take it from me, look at this material, look into it for yourself, research it for yourself, look into it. And so all these different forms of education will come as very helpful on your journey here for action. And more of what the required skills are, we talked about them earlier. It's organization, communication, graphic design, presentation, audio. This stuff is really important, especially in the modern age when it comes to bringing ideas to people. And again, all going back to the idea of advertising or simple education. But I even did examples of this, and that's why I have in parentheses my examples of what I've done to these required skills, right? So when it comes to organization, I bring all these different ideas together. I make PowerPoints. Graphic design, website content, thumbnails, different forms of flags for people to understand. Audio, when it comes to podcasts, maybe doing talks on the street or to people, video content, and networking, going to all sorts of different servers, groups, and clubs of all kinds, going to your job, everywhere to bring knowledge where it is needed, which is almost everywhere in the world, especially if they're, it's our fellow men who need to change the world, because we all change the world. And so share just this knowledge and education. Again, be there, present. You don't have to push it on people. Have this stuff there, and the people who are interested will come your way. You're going to attract them naturally. Those people are going to be the ones who do survive what's coming, and they're the ones who've already maybe gone through some awakening process of their own. You see this often with the truth community per se, but you will notice I have a lot of notes here. It says lead by example, and the example is to guide or to teach, right? The internet is a helpful complementary tool, however, for real life. It is ideal to utilize all the required skills in some way, somehow, in connecting to your appeal with people, right? Because you might be talking to a doctor, next day you're talking to a politician, next day these are all different people, and sometimes you have to understand their mindset, where they're coming from, ask them questions first before you go off and tell them what you're about. Connect with people. This is not about you and your ideas. It's about them. This is about everybody. So get involved with people. Find out what they want in the world, because at the end of the day, we do want the same things. We want to survive, we want to be free, we want maybe to reproduce, simple, basic human functions that people always need, and somehow they crave it just in different ways within their life, especially in the modern world, but they all crave essentially the same things. And so it's all about making connections, the right connections, not just with the knowledge, but with people. And that is where action comes really handy here, and that's why there's all these different skills and all these different things you can do, because the more you do, then the more different people can understand this, the more different ways you have delivering the same knowledge. It's all forms of integration, and you want to see this as integrative coaching. It is that too. And as an integrative nutrition health coach, we're healing the world like we are with the body. We're adding in healthy foods to crowd out the bad foods that don't belong. We're looking at the holistic anatomy of the body by looking at the laws of the universe, and this helps us understand then what needs to be done, right? So you can plug your material into different places, and connecting everything to the movement, connecting everything together, like I mentioned. Bring all back down to nature for individuals. Let me inspire you and help you in your efforts, and such is what the movement is supposed to do. And it's the nature of any movement. It's to amplify voices. It requires expression and gatherings and progression. Otherwise it's not a movement, and that way it always keeps growing. And I still need help with everything that I do. Everything I do is not final. I want people to revise my material to make it even better than it was before. I look for that. I admire that. I think that's great. Again, we need to all be part of this change, and we can make essentially history, because we do, and not make nature. We can make history but not make nature. We need to understand nature. It's always been what we've been doing for all of life, forever. Is understanding who we are as a species and what we need to do to move forward and emerge even better as a species. And so, let's manifest nature's optimum environment to the intended, that of the law. And, it says feel free to put any of the movement material into any of your material. It's all about integration. If you want, you reach out to other content creators, you network with them, and that helps you reach more people. How do you contribute to the cause where unification is required for change, where understanding is necessary for unification, where mass amounts of individuals are necessary for change? Again, these are all requirements. To understand these requirements is, again, understanding the action steps we need. And if you want to do more than simply represent by having a flag or having different forms that just show ideas, talk and educate others, tell them about the, what you have on your mind and all the different ideas. Reboot your health. That's an action step, is focusing on your health. Maybe you have to focus on your own family and friends. Like I said, it's very important to focus on that too, sometimes first. Ask if others are, pro-nature or pro-humanity, if they're into the same things you are, and then share with them the knowledge that they don't have, though, about the similar goals that are at hand. And give away different materials, not just also put them places, but give them away face to face, hand them out, talk about it. These are different things. Don't ever have that escape your mind. Always more options, always more to do. There's always more to change. And that's why I said don't make it a burden on yourself, like, man, I need to do more, but also motivate yourself and say, yeah, there is a lot I can do, and there's a lot that definitely people are not doing. And you see it when you understand all this. You say, wow, man, there's so much to do, to, there's so much to talk about, and it's actually not being talked about. Usually, you go on the internet, you can find whatever you want about this topic, that topic. Everyone's always done something, but no, when it comes to this topic, there's plenty to do that's not being done, and you can see this so evidently as we keep moving on here. And so integration, it's the importance in numbers for changing minds. It's individual behavioral choices, either based in harmony or opposition to natural law, and they combine in energy and effect, and in the aggregate influence the quality of the manifested shared human experience. So all our actions combined. This dynamic acts as the perfect expression of the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. Decisively contrary to the New Age view, in order for a quantum shift to take place, numbers are required. Numbers are required. That was a part of Mark Passio's slide. And the principle of correspondence says, as above, so below. Essentially what this says is individual actions are very much related to the collective actions. So if you change individuals' actions and you do so, through many different individuals, that's going to reflect upon the huge world that we see as like this external world with tons of different people. You think you're alienated from everyone else because you have certain knowledge. Well, it's a small world, my friend, because things could get out there very quickly, and people say, well, you can't change things overnight. You'd be surprised. One thing goes trending on one time in the internet, and soon something big happens, and everybody's, doing something in particular. You never know how things could go in today's world. There's a mass amount of media and communications. Things can get out to people very quickly. Things can change very quickly depending on the circumstances, depending on what the public is being exposed to. And so when you see, okay, they're being exposed to certain types of information, well, what do? You expose them to different types of information. Again, crowding out the bad by adding in the good, especially when it isn't there and it needs to be there. So invoke the energy and the inspiration that is here, needed for this work. You see the energy and people with all these talk show hosts and people promoting perhaps the other agenda that we oppose. Well, you need to bring the energy into the room for the counter agenda to all that. Bring that in and bring it in with the younger generations who have that built-in energy from nature itself, that they want to invoke that, this energy. They say, look at all this world, look at what happened to this world. I don't want to live in a world like this. I want to move forward and make a better future, for myself and for my kids, when I get older. People who are young, they absorb information. They want to do more, but they might not know how. They might not be exposed to this information, so it's important to take a look at that. Take a look at it for sure. And what we see here when we change the world in any degree is this step-by-step process. But particularly when we're talking about this movement and the actions that are required for today's world, this is what I see as the steps to success. So as long as the movement moves, perhaps it could be up these steps. And so what I call this is the 6-step speculation. And one step to the next includes previous steps in circulation. Okay, so that means if we're going from number 1 to number 2, number 1 still applies. And so nature is the answer. The message is the mission. Keep that in mind as we talk about this. Number 1 is representation. So having the ideas present. Again, remember, you start with the idea. And then you go to education and then integration, right? Because the idea something needs to back that idea, education, And then you bring it to different people. And what's going to bind those people? Well, it's going to be the idea. That's why you go back to the idea. So we start with the idea, representation, mass flags. The message is created because the idea is so prevalent in society. You have it there set in stone. Everybody perhaps has a certain type of flag or a certain type of material, a certain type of unifying message as mission. Number 2, the presence picks up on that unifying message as mission, and so the message is then found by more and more people. When you have something such as a flag or its materials, it's naturally going to go to other people, and people are going to see it, and other people are going to pick up onto it, other people are going to do the same thing, so the presence naturally picks up. This is a natural process. This is not one we have to force upon. Really, the hardest thing is actually just starting, getting number 1, people to simply have a flag, people to simply have materials that we all can share together. That could be the hardest step sometimes, okay? So it's starting, again, the 2 biggest things, starting and going all the way, right? So then number 3, the voice picks up. So people start talking about the message because now it's being found, and so now we have messengers being created. because they're speaking on behalf of the message. Some people want to speak more about the message than others. Certain people have certain knowledge, such as the natural law, to contribute to such a message into the world. And then number 4, controversy is created. Now, this is not a bad thing. Controversy in the sense that, the truth is getting out in a world of deception. The awareness is getting out to people who are unconscious, and they need to face that reality, and they need to face their own ignorance, their own fears. There's going to be self-controversy and external controversy created. That's natural. And so the mission is found. Okay, we need to get past the ignorance. Okay, we need to get to these people. Okay, we need to help people understand this. This is where the mission comes in, right? Is understanding, okay, well, how is nature? How nature is the answer? How do we understand that as a species going through years of democide and unnatural systems? The mission is created and bring it to even more people in China, people in countries that are more enslaved than certain areas such as the United States, right? So this is what we're looking at. We have a message and it turns into a mission. Okay, and naturally, because the message is relevant, naturally because the message is something that people agree that we need to return to. Yes, we need to return to nature. We're becoming detached from who we are, our humanity. And so, of course, controversy is going to be created. What do you mean? Robotics is taking over? What do you mean? Technology is controlling us? These are things that we're going to be conflicting with. And so, of course, there's going to be controversy in the process, but we have to keep in mind that it is part of the process, and we don't want to amplify it or push it on or, make it more than what it has to be. And so that's why there is such a thing as messengers and such a thing as these materials to help us, guide us in our actions. And number 5 is natural law directs the mission, because then you really have a guiding mechanism. This is what is on the website. This is what really, the movement gets into. And that is what the message really leads to, right? Nature is the answer. Well, why is nature the answer? Because its laws are telling us to pay attention to it. It's us always a matter of learning those laws, so we know the consequences to our actions, and to realizing that we don't want to lose our humanity, but it's us who did that to begin with. And it is us who needs to keep our humanity. But how do we do so? Well, we understand the laws of how our humanity is kept, and how our humanity affects the world around us. That is all dictated by law. And it can't escape the law. Everything is under the law. It's cause and effect. And so it directs the mission. It directs our direction to go. And that's why it is a directing mechanism. It provides us with a direction for these messengers, for the message, for the mission. And so the message as mission then remains for lasting impact once natural law is in circulation. If this is the truth for the world, and if people really recognize the value in it, to which if it gets out and it is truthful, it will, then it will remain for lasting impact if you can share that through the generations. And that's why it's a message as a mission forever. Sharing to your children, nature is the answer. This is what we did. This is how we got out of such a system that put us in slavery. And, how we can carry this on so we can prevent democide, never let it occur again, never allow slavery to happen again. And that is where number 6 comes in. That is where we've achieved what we wanted to achieve. We've got the knowledge out to people, and now it's just keeping that knowledge, going through the generations of understanding, who we are, and that the best way to promote order or to promote peace or, freedom is to understand what it is, understand what is slavery. Well, it's ownership over your natural rights. Your natural rights are defined by natural law. Natural law is the opposite of man's law. Man's law is created in the existence of government. Government is created by the existence of statism. These are all dot connections that are made when someone learns the idea of natural law, and it debunks everything else that you have ever been programmed into. People want to talk about this and that problem, this problem. Again, when you get to the root cause, nothing else matters. So that's why this will direct the mission so much. When you introduce the idea of natural law, and those messengers naturally will, as again the website, leads people to that knowledge, as again the share sheet mentions that knowledge, as again it is in the very blueprint of nature itself to understand it. And that's why it's an answer, because we seek it. We seek to understand the world around us, and thus we're seeking its laws. And so your job essentially in all of this is to bring truth to action and keep it in action. And you can use nature as the answer, use this movement, unite, unit AE, unit anarchy, unit equality, use this as the guide. Use this presentation as a guide for everything that you do. And different things are going to guide you. Different motivating factors are going to guide you, and you got to find out what that is for yourself. And so more among the steps to success here, because I said, there will be a time where you do need to take arms. You do need to fight for the truth. What do I mean by that? Well, this talks more about that. So if we put the 6-step speculations a little bit more specific as to what goes on here, we see, step 1, mass representation. So we're utilizing the flag and or creative material, conversation. And we're not falling to the political spectrum anymore. We're bringing politics to universal nature, and we're knowing generational sustainability. We know that government is essentially unsustainable for the human race. It always results in millions of deaths. It's always going to be a problem. We understand that politics is naturally divisive, and we want to take people out of those systems. We don't want to fall to those systems, and thus, we want to represent these ideas of universal truth, of natural law, of unity through the understanding of these very factors. And so then we have step 2 to 5. And that is integration, right? Because now you bring in people and ideas. So it's understanding for unity and promotion, right? Integration and promotion for disintegration and demotion. But first is integration and promotion, adding in the crowd out. So natural law and nature is being added into the circulation known as life. And so we are being the change, and we're working representations of the truth. We are being the change, showing by example. This is the best way to teach other people. And inside and outside, whether you're talking to people who are in the police, political, or the public, we're reaching this knowledge to everybody because everybody deserves this knowledge. And yeah, it will help having people in all sorts of different positions, but as long as the knowledge is getting to people, it's getting to where it needs to be. And it makes it much easier if it does get to the people who are currently in the system so they can disintegrate from such a system. But it's also very important to get it to the people outside of such a system, because those are the people who need it the most, because those are the people who ever create the system to begin with. It's the millions of people, not the select 100 that are ruling over the rest of the millions. Those are the people we want to affect, the millions of people. And that's thus required by education, of real or natural law. Not this man's law that we call law, but yet it isn't universal, it isn't immutable, and it isn't binding to the human race. We call it law, but it's not law by definition. It's crazy. So it's just a matter of awareness. And this is, again, where there is natural controversy, because we're tearing down systems that people thought were legitimate, thought were truthful, and we're saying, no, your whole life was essentially a lie. That is a pretty big darn realization, which is why, we call this the one great work. It is not an easy thing to deprogram people out of their current mental state. It is not an easy thing at all. It takes a lot of time, patience, and courage, and bravery, all the many factors we talked about. Now, looking at steps 4 to 6, you'll notice now we're going toward step number 6. The reason why is because now we're looking at getting rid of the systems that don't belong, the ones that are unnatural and immoral, the ones that will always result in harms, millions of deaths worldwide. And so we're disintegrating from government, and we're demoting statism, which is what creates government. So how do we do that? It's ultimately deciding to stand our ground. Stand our ground for nature, knowing that the force of masses outweighs any coming violence. Now, what do I mean by that? Because there is a difference between force and violence. Well, force is when you apply a good amount of strength together, such as a movement, many people together, and that's why I said of masses, to recognize that they have self-defense, and that is a principle they inherently have. Everybody has the right to self-defend themselves against, however, an incoming aggressor. So when the government says, okay, well, you're not paying taxes anymore, so we need to lock you up, and you're not complying with us, so we're going to go and take you. We're going to go and, bust down in your house, and we're going to take you. And by threat of violence, you have no choice but to comply. You're going to say, no, I'm with my whole community here. We're all not paying taxes, and we're all going to stand up with our firearms and defend ourselves from you guys, which are really just simple human beings as well. Why would you do this to your fellow kind? What are you doing to your own humankind? This is the type of thing you say to them, because don't they realize that they're also suppressing their conscience to follow orders and attack you when they don't want to do that? Why would they do it? Oh, it's because they're following orders. The whole reason why you left the system to begin with. So this is disintegration in the motion. It's understanding, okay, we got to stand our ground, and all stop doing certain actions at once, like paying taxes, because that is what's going to get rid of this system that doesn't belong, that is involuntary, that does promote violence. It is a monopoly on violence. And so we apply force through necessary self-defense, expression of self-responsibility, which we have innately by nature, so we're using it, human nature for nature, and sustainability, saying, yeah, we can live without you. Yeah, we can, do all this stuff. It isn't hard, and we choose where we want to put our own money, and things do get done more because we're not reliant so much on these external systems that always fail us over time. That always result in death. I mean, who would want to be part of such a system? It starts to make sense to us, man, we should get out of such a system when we understand this knowledge. So it includes self-defense from all government sources and corporate technologies, because technology might be used against people as well. And so ultimately, you are fighting for truth, you're fighting for nature through force. And thus, even if it comes down to killing, to stand up for the truth, to free yourself, such must be done, as done with any revolution and independence in the past. They have to kill the armed guard. They have to, go against the crown. And it involved killing the cops, like, oh my gosh. But this was a thing that they would do because they saw it as necessary for their own survival, for their own prosperity. They don't want to go against their own fellow men, but is it their fault that their own fellow men is fooled by the system that is known as order following? This dangerous belief system, the most dangerous superstition, as Larkin Rose puts it. So it's a matter of bringing that knowledge not just to them, but, to everybody, and so we can make this as much peaceful as possible of a process of getting rid of the systems that don't belong. We don't want this to be too crazy. We don't want to ever apply force and violence ever, hopefully. And we want to do things peacefully most of the time just through conversation. And we can end things very quickly with just conversation. But that's if people are open-minded and they listen. And I do believe that is possible. And then there's just going to be small amounts of, different issues that arise where people do have to stand their ground against the government. And because there's mass amounts of people doing it at the same time, the government won't be able to do much against that. They're fighting their own kind, these cops. And so why would they want to do that? And so this is where we really say, gotcha, we are free and we're going to stand our ground. No one's going to tell us what to do. This is where we say, nature is the answer. Government's not the answer. Not the answer. And so step 6, from here on out, when the world has done the same, the knowledge keeps spreading throughout the world, and we get other, different communities to do the same thing, defend themselves, stop paying taxes, and they see that you're not paying taxes, and they don't want to pay taxes anymore, so they're going to do the same thing. It's a ripple effect, a domino effect, and that's why, we only need 1 or 2 neighborhoods to maybe just start this chain effect, to create a demonstration, to get on the media and show that it is possible, that they can defend themselves from the government, and that even if the government did affect them, what a tragedy would that be? Oh my gosh, all these citizens stop paying taxes, and now the government, starts attacking its own citizenry to try to control them. That would be, what a news story to show to the world and say, man, your government is quite corrupt, that it has to do such a thing. And, defy its own citizenry to stay in power, to keep certain people in power. This is absolutely absurd. And so step 6 we have here, again, past now integration and promotion and disintegration and demotion, although this is always forever during the process, because again, all these steps are still in circulation. Step 6 is generational knowledge of statism and natural law in the multitudes of any why and how of why nature is the answer. Why and how nature is the answer. So non-aggression principle is also at play here, and the golden rule, everything that comes thereof, understanding these 2 things, statism and natural law, or natural rights, one way or another, they're all understanding the same thing here, statism. And now we are essentially living in a truly free society backed by natural force and natural law. And of course, there's going to be, law firms, there's going to be still people doing certain things. And as long as there's no involuntary, like, you need to rule over me, and, I want somebody to rule over me, and it's this type of scenario where you believe that someone has this vested authority inside of them, you won't have to worry about these problems ever rising again. Government will never grow again because no one ever gave credence to statism. People know what statism is, and not enough people will be statist, because the knowledge of statism is so rampant, and because it's truthful, it's going to stay around. The truth is going to stay around, and it'll be hard for any government to ever grow again. And so the few people who do believe in statism, it won't matter. Their governments won't grow, because people are refused to comply, because they understand this knowledge. They understand the past. They understand history. They understand the mass amount of democide that occurred. They understand that they need to be self-responsible, that they can't give that away. They understand what slavery is, and they don't want to be slaves anymore. They want to keep what their forefathers fought for them, which is independence, freedom, from all types of slavery. And that is you. You are the forefather. You freeing us from the world that we live in today, you're going to be the forefathers for those, down the road who are saying, well, I'm going to keep what my family fathers essentially gave to me, which is freedom, true freedom. America was just step one of the process, and now we need to go all the way, and say this is what freedom is from all forms of slavery. Civil War was only part 2. Now we're at part 3 of society. We want to free people from all types of mental enslavement. We want to bring in idea of morality and understanding that everybody should know their own natural rights. This shouldn't be something that's kept for a certain few or kept hidden deliberately on purpose for power. No, we're bringing this knowledge to everybody because everybody deserves it, and this is what's going to free them. It's empowerment. And so here we have figurative equations for what this is, right? So you have people plus the knowledge of nature. And here, then we have action based in truth, because people are the ones who take action. And knowledge stands for itself. So knowledge requires that people understand it. And then when people understand it, then their actions are going to be aligned. And thus, then the actions are going to be based in truth. They're going to be for the positive expression of natural law. And so then also we have another equation here. When we don't know, we don't say no. We allow evil. We just say yes, yes, yes. I'll go along with all of it. Another equation here we have changing the world equals changing the minds of the masses. You need to change the minds so you can change anything else. Our minds always become our actions. Now another equation here, which really sums up everything as well, is understanding that denature or nature is plus or equals question or answer. So this is very complicated, of course, but nature equals answer would, of course, be nature is the answer. And denature equals question makes us question, well, what is denatured? What is not intended here for life on Earth? Nature is that question. Well, why is nature is that question? Are we detached from nature? Are we being denatured? So, and then, so you can use this in any form of, as it's presented, and it all makes sense when you question it. Everything's a matter of question when you were thinking. Now, when you collect information and you collect individuals with love, you are creating transformation and creating communities around truth. Because now you have individuals coming together and they love each other, so now they're communities and they're based around truth because of the information they have, and that information allows them to make transformation because of the education that changed their minds so they can change the actions of themselves and thus the world around them. Then we have quality, which is guides, and nutrients and natural law, plus quantity, which is people, calorie, or nature is the answer, the movement itself that represents natural law, that says here are the guides of the people, and that allows us to move toward freedom, because now we have natural law, these laws in place, and then we have a movement to help bring this knowledge to more people. And when it comes to health, when we look at quantity, we're looking at calorie, but quality looks at nutrient. That matters a lot. A lot of the time we focused on calorie, but we realize how important nutrient is. And same thing with people and guides. Certain people, they're going to be the ones who are most vocal, the ones who understand this knowledge the most. The knowledge always is going to rise. The truth is always going to rise to the top. It's just the way it always goes. Moving toward freedom. Moving toward freedom when we have both quality and quantity. We have enough calories that we need. We have enough nutrients we need. We have the natural law in circulation, and we have the movement to help bring it to circulation. We have enough people, who are also enough guides to help bring it to even more people, to help share it with more people. So every part of that equation also makes sense here. And then we have a final equation here at the bottom. To add is to join, it is positive, is to attain sum, which is quantity. And that is steps 1 through 3 of the 6-step speculation. And to multiply is to grow, is to attain product, which is result. And that's steps 4 to 6. So what does that mean? Well, you're bringing things together, but then to multiply it means you're making it even bigger, right? So like we can share ideas one-on-one, but when we turn into a movement, we're sharing, 3 on 100, and so both are essential and essentially connected to the progression. So we attain the sum and we want to attain the product. And people may say, well, that's the same thing. Well, exactly, But to multiply, we're looking at something bigger. That's why we had multiplicative natural law expression, not just positive natural law expression, because we want to amplify the actions of love and knowledge and sovereignty and freedom and order. We want to help bring that to people, and that requires multiplying those actions within our own lives and sharing that with other people, the courage to do so, the responsibility, the guidance, like I mentioned before, the multiplicative expressions. Now, what we need to do here as well when it comes to our actions is inspire anticipation. Show people that, the future tomorrow is a better world. It is a world that we can look up to. And although there's always going to be pressures, put on us, and it says any movement based on truth will be attacked, and it says with freedom everything falls into place. So we don't have to worry. We have to just trust the process. If we know something's the truth, if we know a right is a right and a wrong is a wrong, we need to stick by it by all costs. Again, it's fighting for truth. It's a battle here, an internal battle that we are going through, and sometimes physical when it comes to, again, self-defense. But we need to fight on the mental and physical level here for the truth, and look at the anticipation here. And that involves, being the change to see the truth in action. I think you could see some great things happen when you bring this knowledge to people. You see an inspiration, creativity, because now they have to bring us to people and they find their calling. Certainly I've made channels and I've made videos on all this, didn't expect to get into a network about it, but it's only because I saw the knowledge is important. It's not like I'm passionate about it or anything, but rather the passion is really simply the moral obligation, as I mentioned before, to share the knowledge because of how important it is. And so when I say, okay, well, let's look at the better tomorrow because it is the truth, well, what do I mean? Well, there's going to be health benefits because now there's varieties of medicinals. We're not just looking at allopathic, pharmaceutical medicine. We're looking at natural medicine, all forms of homeopathic medicine. We're looking at education benefits. There's no forced schooling put on anybody. There's people educating themselves. They're getting out in the real world, learning real economics. They're learning everything they need to know, not all this useless junk that they know they don't need to know, and it's just going to waste time of their life, and it's just going to put so much stress and pressure on them, and there's going to be a lot of, people that they don't want to be around. They feel like they have no choice but to be there, and it's sort of like slavery within itself. They feel like they're in this prison, and this is not good. That is not education. This needs to be something that definitely with freedom will come about. You don't want government-created schools and funded schools and education that is extremely expensive, and essentially the student feels like, well, oh my gosh, I have to go through school again. Like, that's not something that they aspire to, and they lose passion for different things, and they're pushed in certain directions, like, you should do this because this makes you the most amount of money. This isn't so much natural, okay, for any human being in nature, where they realize, family is important, these things come first, and I need to focus on who I am and what I want, and I'm not doing things for other people all the time, but I'm also not super egoic either. So freedom really provides that perfect balance, actually, to everything, despite how unperfect it actually is. And that's why it's perfect. Nature isn't perfect, and that's why we're embracing that non-perfectness, because that is actually the optimal blueprint for the world and for life in general. And so then there's security benefits, and that comes, again, with obligated responsibility of having arms to defend oneself. There's security firms and all these other things. There's a lot more, actually, security. You're not relying on people minutes away. You are taking things into your own matters, so that way, because when things happen in seconds, you can handle them, and you can, handle your own problems. You don't have to worry about, some government third party getting involved to mess up everything and make things more complicated. There's no war to essentially identify. There might be some conflicts here and there, but there's no overseas conflict and unnatural, like, okay, you're going to be displaced from your family. You have no choice choice. Otherwise, you get locked up. But you need to go overseas and you need to fight these people you don't even know, for this country, for the greater good. Again, the greater good. For some cause that they want to make you believe in. Again, no belief required here. You're in charge of your destiny, and you find your destiny because you are in nature and you're living out freedom. And freedom allows you to see possibility and allows you to be more creative than ever. You're going to see creativity and innovation boom. You're going to see small businesses grow like crazy in a free world because they're not, forced by taxation and certain laws, do this and do that, sign out this paperwork. It's ridiculous. People can't freely trade with one another. What's going on? Can only Amazon and Google and these big corporations be in control of everything? That is not a free world. Okay, and you're going to still have corporations in a free world, of course, but you're going to have a lot of competition, and thus, those corporations are not going to be tax exempt where they can do whatever they want and get away with different crimes sometimes. No, there's going to be so much competitors that these organizations, if they're doing wrong things to people, if they're censoring them, there's going to be so many competitors it won't even matter. That censorship will naturally cease. The organizations that do bad things will naturally lose support because people are freely sharing ideas in a free world, and they freely have all these different businesses and options to choose from. So certain ones are not going to excel too much more than others. And sure, there will be ideas that still do, surge in popularity. But like anything, if it gets too big and there's problems present, it will just die out, and something else will rise above that and to say, here's the new, better, improved version. Just as us here as humanity recognizing, okay, government didn't work. We need to know this. We need to move past this, and we need to move toward a more sustainable future for the world and for our children. Okay, this is realizations coming through time. Again, time showing the true nature of all things. And so then we have also natural population control. People say, oh my gosh, the world's going to get too populated. And if people are free too, people are going to produce babies or whatever. No, nature is in control. Nature's in control of populations. When humans are in control of their own populations, that is government. That is control of another human being and saying what you should do with your own life. Nature will naturally, deal with this stuff. If there's not enough food, there's going to be problems with survival in that regards. This is all stuff that nature will naturally handle on its own, and nature is meant to be in control. Nature is the answer, not some man who's saying that they're nature and that you have to depend on them for everything. It's nonsense. Okay, so then truth can rise above, unsuppressed, because again, there's no censorship. There's job benefits, because again, you have local businesses, there's more competition. You have decentralized media, so you have whistleblowers that can come out, especially when you start exposing the system, and then you say, here's a movement full of tons of people who want to free ourselves from the system. All of a sudden, the whistleblowers feel like, hey, I can expose everything now that I have a bunch of people who are going to back me. I have a bunch of people who are on my side. I'm going to go, and join these guys. I'm gonna share with them everything that I know. And then soon also people come to understand all the hidden files that was kept away from them all these years about, I don't know, UFOs or weather modification, whatever it may be. We'll get access to it all because, again, the public deserves to know that knowledge anyways. And so the best way that we can get that knowledge is, well, if we create a free world. And if we do so, we have to, again, by requirement, do so by education with other people of statism. Okay, so not just education of these things that we can try to get our hands on that, have been exposed to the public, but actually everything will be exposed to the public if we can free the world first. Okay, and we'll get the most of all the deepest, juiciest details, and we'll probably talk about that for many, many more years to come. All the different crimes that were hidden from the public, and we find out over time, like, oh my gosh, there was a pedophile ring that was being held for hundreds of years and nobody knew about it. Well, duh, because again, these order followers just let these people be in control of their life, and these people are exempt from their own crimes, so they can do whatever they want. They feel like they can. And in a free world, we wouldn't tolerate this, People would be with their families more. They wouldn't let their children be taken away. People would take things into their own matter if they see certain things happening. And there would just be a lot more transparency, a lot more honesty, a lot more responsibility naturally that comes with the freedom. Now, cultures are embraced. People like to be with their own kind, and then, you have these different cultures. That's a beautiful thing. That's not a bad thing, that people have their own cultures and people are attached to their own nature that's intended. And I think it's important people always love where they come from, their own history, their ancestry, not be ashamed of it in any way. Everybody was a form of slavery, everybody did some bad things, but we need to recognize the real problem in the room is not us and not our cultures, but rather the governments that were always created, that were controlling the cultures and mixing the cultures and forcing certain people to go there and here and all over the place. This is nonsense. Let people naturally, developed with one another, and understand that we're all human beings, we're all equal, and that's what matters at the end of the day. And we don't want to split each other up. And by learning natural law, we understand equality. Our rights do not come from human beings. Human beings can't grant it to other people and take away rights. No, the rights are with all of us innately, and that's why we're simply sharing knowledge to say, yeah, it is here, and recognize that. Now act upon it, and let's stop playing into the system that creates this whole problem to begin with. And so then also what you see with this better tomorrow is more productivity, adventure, creativity, imagination. You can't imagine a better world unless your mind is free. When you are free, you see possibility again, and it's creative. And so people are all of a sudden making all sorts of different products. People are all of a sudden working together in so many different ways. Oh my gosh, innovation up the kazoo. More than we ever had. Yeah, we're moving with technology now, but we're dependent on certain corporations to do so. They have the money, they have the resources, they have the supplies. I can't do it myself, and they're doing it for me. I don't need to do it. In a world of freedom, you feel like you can do anything if you put your mind toward it, and you get the resources and you see the requirements to it. There's no cheating into some sort of system to get you through this and feel like, this is unfair because this person got this and they did that and that's how they got famous, and it's all about their image and their ego. And you have all these issues of the modern world that just all of a sudden vanish in a free world. It would surprise you if you do the thinking upon this. Okay, but there's also no taxation. There's no permits or man-made denaturing control agents. These things are all innately wrong by natural law, and I encourage you to look into it if you don't know why. But, simply put, they're man-made, number one, first and foremost, and number two, they're backed by the threat of violence, just as a lot is by government, so you can be easily more controlled, and you can't go about doing things freely for yourself. You can't choose what you want to put your money into, you can't choose what you want to do, and thus you are, by definition, less free. Okay, now family is encouraged naturally as well in this environment, as with tradition and social behavior. People will always, have their own traditions and criticize other traditions, but there's always going to be new traditions that grow. And, social behavior, people, us as human beings, we're social animals. We're meant to be together. We're meant to talk to one another. That is encouraged. And so, of course, as well, you're going to have neighborhoods talking to one another. And I think it's a beautiful thing to see. This is anticipation. This is seeing the better world that is truly possible if we create that world through freeing the world through our own minds. And so if you want to start talking to your neighbors, go ahead. If you want to start talking to your family, connecting with your family, go ahead. Again, that would then be the example of being changed. Can you find ways to use natural medicinals now? Great. Can you find ways to leave the education system now? Great. But just know the root cause to the situation. The one solution, again, is freeing people from statism, and conversation to do so would be best. Education. Okay, so just understand that root cause, and you can still get out of the system in different ways while you can now, but you can leave that entire system as a whole when you have other people free from such a system in their mind to begin with. You can free a whole world, and it could happen rather quickly if we can get this knowledge out to many people at once, or in a certain amount of days where certain things go viral, and it is hard for them to suppress the truth when it's out to people, when it exposes and shatters all their previous belief systems. That's going to stick with people, for a good reason, because they see it as so important, because it's literally debunking everything that they were taught. They're going to see that as like, shoot, I'm glad I learned this. So, rules for success. I figured to just go over some rules, because again, this is a guiding presentation. Embrace and appeal to the times. There's always going to be different times of need as the world grows into survival situations where maybe, there's economic collapses, or, certain situations where they're going to try to get more control. You want to, during this time, try to get less control from these systems and saying, look, these are the systems that failed us. Don't fall for the next thing they give you because they want you to be dependent on them for what they have to give you in return, because you are so economically deprived by their very system that created it. And that is what we call the Hegelian dialectic, problem, react, solution. They create a problem and then they could create a solution, and thus you lose more of your own freedom over time. And so we see this, little bits of your freedom just going away, and you can't notice that it's there. And that's why we have the world that we live in today, is people are unconscious of what's going on. They're unconscious of the wrong that's being done by themselves, by their own consent, and thus they're contributing to the world and to the problems. Again, we are the problem. And instead of pointing the finger at everybody else, we need to look at ourselves. So embrace and appeal to the times when people are in survival and you have, survival foods and materials. Share that with other people. Use that as a way to share this education with other people. Provide the alternative to the system that's going to want to always be there for people when they are so desperate and they feel like they need to be dependent. Be that alternative. Be the present change so you can show them, no, you don't need to follow the system. Okay, and that system is going to screw you over. It always will. You might think you want it as a short-term fix. Long-term, it's always going to screw you over, as it always has and always will be. It is government. It is innately immoral. Okay, but without saying that part specifically, you can get to that. Bridge it to that, because there's going to be times where people are going to be so fed up of what's going on, they're going to maybe listen to you when things do go down, when they learn from experience. Because if they couldn't learn from awareness and they couldn't learn from the education, from these videos, for example, they're going to learn from experience. Yeah, I need to talk to people. Yeah, I need to go out to my neighborhood. Yeah, I need to start doing things, because it's going to come as a moral obligation, again, a survival instinct, like, yes, I need to do this. Yes, I need to stand for my children. Yes, I need to be responsible for my family. Yes, I need to get firearms. That stuff will come necessary for you when you realize that, man, your life is in danger. You realize, shoot, the government screwed me over, and I see it all now. Like that, those are awakening moments that make you commit to certain things that you probably wouldn't have committed to if you didn't go through that experience. And a lot of people have experienced it. Luckily, I didn't experience anything that made me go through my awakening. I saw that through asking questions, awareness. It's not just all through experience, but rather awareness. And then you turn that awareness into experience. And then, you can continue that cycle. But it's better than learning right from experience and getting hurt and then learning from it. You don't want to get hurt, right? This is all about lessening harm. And that's one of the rules to success that we'll go over soon. Don't be secretive. Share to the public. This is not something to keep hidden for yourself. The whole problem with this world anyways is certain people keeping certain things for themselves away from others. That is, this sort of ego hierarchy as it is. People are looking for others. Keep that in mind. People, they want change. They know the truth, but they need other people with them to give them the motivation and the inspiration to say, here, we can do this together, and now let's do it together. And now that you have me and I have you, we can do this. That is such a big thing. It's so important in health too. People want to lose weight, and it's like, they know what to do with their own body, but they just don't have the motivation to. When someone is there with them, it's like, yeah, I can do this now. I've got the support. I can do it. And that's why guidance is so important. That's why coaching is so important. That's why teaching is so important. They're all the same thing, essentially. Commit to transmit conversation. That's what it means. Commit to sharing with people conversation. Even if you're handing out flyers, make sure you always pitch in and add your own flair to things. If you're sharing other people's flyers, especially, or my materials, add in your own flair to things, your own materials. Again, this gives you not just more personal investment, but more connection to the person that you are delivering the information to. They know that you have some of the knowledge yourself. And it adds a more personal, more human, natural touch to it, which again, nature is the answer. Reach those in the dark and those who disagree. Very important. A lot of people want to stay in their echo chambers, especially a lot of people in the truth community. They just will go on debates all night long, and they won't talk to people who disagree. It's important to talk to people who disagree, but you don't want to seek disagreement and say, yes, I'm going to stay in my mental chamber all day. I'm not here to learn something new. You should actively seek consensus, and you should seek it in the universal. You don't have to go into the details of everything the government's doing, and you're not realizing that, there's chemtrails and all this. No. Okay? not all that, but the stuff that we can understand within our own lives, the universal stuff, the deepest root, again, the main problem and the main solution. Don't forget that. Okay? And so reach those in the dark. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to talk to people you never talked to before. Don't be afraid, because those are the people who will need this knowledge the most, right? They're the ones who need the saving the most, perhaps. The people who are never going to be exposed to it, the people who, again, who else is going to share it other than you? You know, it's going to be you. So do all you can to do the best you can. That's another general rule for success. You want to do your best, and I think most people, don't you generally want to do your best in this life? You know, what are you here to do in life? Are you here just to work like a slave and contribute nothing? Or are you here to give it your all and look at the bigger picture? You know, to do big, to think big, to look big, like I said before, right? So serve the world, not just your country. That's a big picture. You know, not just looking at some select piece of land. It's already sort of supremacist to think, okay, well, it's only my country I want. Well, of course you want your country to succeed. You want your culture to succeed. But don't forget about the world as well. You know, it's really, this is a worldly thing. You know, we're freeing people from slavery, and there's governments all throughout the world right now. And they're taking over every zone, and every zone that thinks that they're free for a moment, the governments come in and raid in and take everything from them. You know, that is not a good thing to see. So we want to free the world, and we don't just want to focus on select countries. But we can use, you know, select countries to be that domino effect for the other countries. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And people are always going to say, you know, my land and America is, I'm so proud about America because they love their land, they love their country. And that doesn't mean that they don't love the world. So just some disclaimers there. Unnatural systems will never exist again with education. Again, you know, if there's certain truths that are apparent to humanity, they're not kept away and they're kept in circulation, then, again, if it's the truth, then it will remain. And you don't have to worry about it. These systems ever rising again. You know, this cycle of government will never rise again when you bring this truth to people. We are fighting ignorance and fear more than anything. So even though, you know, we say that we're fighting statism and that's the main problem, we're ultimately always fighting ignorance and fear, because that's what ultimately got us in this. You know, fear from the threat of violence that kept us in control, and ignorance from the knowledge that would have otherwise freed us. And again, you know, slaves of the past, physical slaves, were unable to read, unable to look into knowledge, and that's why they were unable to free themselves. They thought, again, they were just naturally slaves, and that is not quite the good mindset, not very empowering for them to go and do their own thing, and thus they were not creative because they couldn't create anything for themselves because they had no freedom. Okay, so again, freedom and creativity goes hand in hand. Show that you're creative through your actions, create different materials, create conversations, and you are a living expression of freedom, which is a living expression of truth, which is a living expression of nature, and thus you're automatically saying nature is the answer. All right, don't make yourself a threat. It's about everybody. And again, you must speak upon material and share your own insights, your own pitch and all this. You know, it's ultimately always you. It's always going to come from you. Whether anything you're sharing, it's always ultimately going to come from you if you're the one sharing it. And you're not going to make yourself a threat, because again, you're going to say this is about everybody. This is your movement, not just my movement. You know, this is everybody. I'm not here to single out one person or one idea. We're looking at everything. Natural law governs all consequences to all behavior. Yeah, everything's important that's going on right now. We just have to make sure we get to the root cause to the problems. You know, it's not that those things aren't problematic. Yeah, the symptoms are problematic too, but the root cause is the most problematic. You know, so we can focus on that, and we can have focuses, so we have direction and we know what we're tackling, but also it is about everything. It's about everybody, and we don't want to shut out certain voices and shut out certain ideas. Okay, never, ever. And if we ever seem like we are, because someone claims that we are, or you know, or you are, you know, make the disclaimers, clarify, you know, explore, be human about it. Just simply, you know, have the open mind. We're in a world where we have expanded brains. We have more morality than ever. We can explore these ideas, and we can do so in depth with different wording and materials. This is the time for humanity to really awaken consciousness and show that it's on a level that it's never been on before. And so wrong will always be done, but really what we're doing here is just to lessen its manifestation. We realize that government is the greatest manifestation of harm on the earth, and that by getting rid of it, we are lessening the biggest form of manifestation and harm on the earth. And so we are really in an effort to promote life, you know, promote nature, promote truth, and bring that to the forefront instead of the wrong, the evil doing in the world that is creating chaos. Now, as long as the ideas get out there and become present, the truth prevails. I mentioned that many times. The direction is clear, and therefore there is no reason not to start taking action. Again, some people feel like, oh, I don't know enough yet. I need to study into this more. Yeah, of course, it's important that you look into things more if you feel like you need to understand more, but you likely already have ideas, especially if you reach this far in the presentation. You likely already have ideas that you want to share with other people that you see are important that other people don't realize and they don't see for themselves. So you start there. You start with the simple things. If it's really just our nature that's under attack, that's very simple. Okay, freedom, expression, making sure that we're able to speak, we're able to think for ourselves. That's all we're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, that's very simple. Does it take any genius to figure out and, some long study to figure out? No, it doesn't. Not at all. In fact, you can just end right there. What more, explains it than I want to be self-responsible, I own myself, I just want people to think? That answers all our questions, because government by its very definition is, stopping people from thinking, pushing certain opinions upon others, saying this is what the way the world has to be and you have to live with it. I mean, this is nonsense. Can't we apply our common sense to this instead of through studying all these sorts of different forms of knowledge to then understand the actions that we have to take? Okay, common sense. I really hope that you can, utilize that, especially if you understand this knowledge deep enough. Again, you see the many avenues and outlets of action. So never forget the main problem, however, and the main action. Just never forget that, because you want to get to the root cause. You want to be simple yet effective. And so now we have questions of impact. So as opposed to much of the independent media truth community, I want to hear not what videos you've watched. I want to hear, number 1, how are you taking action to do your best? Number 2, what actions do you plan to take within your own life? Number 3, how big are you looking at your life and potential? Number 4, what can you do that can help the world see knowledge through different perspectives? Number 5, what individuals do you know to help you gain influence in spreading the message? Number 6, what groups have you gone to in trying to seek consensus, build bridges and connect dots, filling voids and providing others with universal direction? Number 7, what professional affiliations have you been reaching out to in order to create more validity for the movement and your presence? So these 7 questions here are your questions of impact. This will allow you to make more of an impact. You go over these questions anytime you feel like, I want to do more, I need to do more, and I feel like I need to make more of an impact, or am I making enough impact? These questions really help you answer that for yourself. Again, I'm sure you can always add more questions to it yourself, but I'd say this is the general outline that I'm going to give you here for the questions of impact. Now, if you want more guides, because we've reached the final end of this PowerPoint, this presentation, I thank you for listening all the way up to this point. If you want more guides, I have a 310 action steps list, and I have a Nature is the Answer terminology, a natural law terminology, dictionary, glossary, if you will, a list with many more rules for success. I also have the share sheet, which I mentioned was the foundation to the Nature is the Answer movement. And I even have one zip file with many resources, including the slides to this presentation, and it's all on nita.one/sheets. Okay, so it's right there on the screen for you. You can go to that link and you can download all that stuff for yourself, and you could see in detail, for example, the 310 action steps list. If you want a lot of action steps, there you have everything. It doesn't matter what category it is. It goes through every type of different category, no matter where you are in business or personal life. There's different action steps in there. I'm sure there's always something that you could work on more, and it basically just gives you a list of ideas, so you can see maybe I want to try this, or maybe I should do this, or integrate it with my current action. And so for simple or complex action, because it's technically both, right? We're looking at education. It's very simple, talking with other people, sharing these ideas, but it's also complex because it's a matter of how much you want to go forward with that, how much you want to speak on behalf of it, how much you want to, say you need to look into all this, or I'm going to give you the full rundown. Like, that's more complex, right? But simple is like, this is what it is, with common sense, and I'm just going to do this simple action. I'm just going to share flags. So nita.one/action, nita.one/action. That's a link you can go to, and it goes over general action. Okay, and it's very simple at the end of the day, but it could also be pretty complex. It's all a matter of what your contribution is, how much change that you want to make, how much of a legacy you want to make, and how motivated you are. Okay, because this is all goes down to the same thing. Again, your cause, your movement, your solutions here. So this whole presentation you can always go back to if you need to learn more, but you can just look at the slides now that you can download it. And if you want more guiding videos on general action steps in general or the education itself, I mean, you'll see plenty on my channel, but here are some examples. There's a video I did on unnecessary anger and struggles, because I know a lot of people, especially in the truth community, get in a lot of fights with people, or they get angry because of what's going on in the world. They have struggles when it comes to talking with their family and friends. So I made sure I do a podcast on that. Then I have a video about natural leadership, because that's important, because you want to be a natural leader, right? You don't want to be an artificial leader and be the very thing that you are against. And so let's distinguish what a natural leader is versus an artificial leader, a fake, I'm a puppet who just reads off a teleprompter. Distinguish between a natural and a fake leader. And then we talk about how slavery still exists. That's one of the other videos. Limited government is impossible, because a lot of people who are freedom-minded might still believe in that idea of monarchism, which is limited government or small government as a means to somehow balance the world, when government by itself, by its nature, does not exist and should not exist. And that's why I have the video 144 proofs government should not and does not exist. Then I have resources about teaching natural law. You can find that at nita.one/learn. And you can see there's a master test sheet if you want to test yourself. There's also a question sheet, so you can learn all about natural law simply through just questions if you're really interested, so you can also test yourself more. The only government is self-government is another video I did, again, talking about how you are in control of your own mind. And thus it also, I think, is a good bridge for some people who are still stuck in the government loop and they can't get it out of their mind. The symbolic nature of a white flag, I think, is also a pretty good video, because it goes over, what we use as a flag for nature is to answer the movement that I have here, and why I chose a white flag. It's white is this color that combines all the other colors in the rainbow. And it's meant to be simple. Everything that's on the website, the whole website itself as a movement website, is meant to be simple. It's not to be too crazy. It's not meant to have a billion resources or whatever. It's meant to simply keep the message and the mission very simple, clear cut, concise, and have the shareable resources there, have the share sheet, have maybe a simple intro video, and it's all there on the website, and nothing more, nothing less. Keep it as is. The foundation, the website is for everybody to use. You can share it on any of your social medias, anywhere that you see fit, so you can help share this movement, so we can all make more of an impact together. And that way we can actually make an impact. We have to do that. It's a requirement that we do so. Okay, so the logo, is NITA. Nature is the answer. You can see it in the logo, and it's a tree, it's a sun. There's many different aspects to it. There's also a description on the website about the logo. Very simple. And then we have the truth community will not succeed. I talked about that. That's another video I did, because there's some very powerful things we need to understand within our own communities. Yeah, we are stuck in our own echo chambers a lot. Yeah, we aren't always looking at the actions we need to take. Yeah, we aren't being as courageous and as brave as we need to be. We aren't inspiring other people to take certain actions. We're not inspiring certain content creators to get hundreds of thousands of views, to hold their own rallies, to really, show the example of being the change. So there's a lot of things the truth community can do. They can merge together. I mean, that's millions of numbers right off the bat. The use of their network can make so much of a difference. I talk about this on nita.one/, independent, no, indie media, INDIEMEDIA, okay? You can go to nita.one/indie media, okay, for more about independent media. And then we have Be the Natural Change. That's another resource that I've done, and I've talked so much about different action steps and change, so you can find a lot more about this on nita.one/journal. Okay, and so I want people to feel inspired, and yeah, maybe looking at me doing it, maybe that will inspire you, but just get out there and do it. If you see there's certain problems in the world, stop complaining and start doing. Like that quote said in the beginning of this presentation. I thank you for watching. This is Cory, Edmund, Endrulat. Nature's the answer. Leave your comments below. Leave your suggestions below, what you've done, because I want to hear, and we should integrate our actions together. We need to be the change together. We want this world together with more freedom, so we need to be in this together. Thank you very much. This is Cory, Endrulat. Nature is the answer.